Tonight, we begin with an era that Hollywood got completely wrong. The Ice Age wasn't a cute animated adventure with talking mammoths and lovable sloths. It was a nightmare of survival, extinction, and secrets so dark that scientists are only now uncovering the full horror of what happened when ice ruled the world. So before we dive into the frozen depths of humanity's most brutal chapter, take a moment to like this video if you're ready for some unsettling truths. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. There's something oddly comforting about connecting with fellow night owls while we explore the coldest, darkest period in human history. Now dim the lights, maybe grab a warm drink, and settle in for tonight's journey. Because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about our ancient past. The secrets buried in ice don't just tell us where we came from. They warn us about what we're capable of. Picture this. You wake up one morning and world has changed. Not gradually, not over decades, but suddenly. The sun barely penetrates the grey sky. Snow falls in July. Your breath forms clouds even indoors. This isn't science fiction. This is what our ancestors faced during the Ice Age, a period so brutal that it nearly erased humanity from existence entirely. For over 2.5 million years, ice sheets advanced and retreated across continents like slow-motion tsunamis, each cycle lasting tens of thousands of years. During the worst periods, ice covered nearly 1/3 of Earth's land surface. Glaciers 2 miles thick buried entire mountain ranges. Sea levels dropped by 400 feet, exposing vast landmasses that are now underwater graveyards, hiding the remains of lost civilizations. But here's what the textbooks don't tell you. The Ice Age wasn't just cold. It was violently, chaotically cold. Temperatures could plummet 20 degrees in a matter of decades. Massive ice dams would form, creating temporary lakes the size of modern countries, then burst without warning, unleashing floods that make today's tsunamis look like puddle splashes. These weren't gradual climate shifts that species could adapt to over millennia. These were climate catastrophes that happened faster than evolution could respond. The Younger Dryas event, occurring around 12,000 years ago, serves as a perfect example of Ice Age brutality. In less than a human lifetime, global temperatures crashed, plunging the world back into full glacial conditions just as it was beginning to warm. Imagine being a hunter-gatherer who had never seen ice, watching glaciers suddenly advance across landscapes that had been green valleys just years before. This wasn't climate change as we understand it today. This was climate warfare. And yet, somehow, humans survived. Not just survived, but began to thrive in ways that would define our species forever. The question isn't how we endured the Ice Age. The question is what we became in the process of enduring it. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that Ice Age humans weren't the primitive cave dwellers we once imagined. They were sophisticated, artistic, and terrifyingly adaptive back 40. Cave paintings dating 1,000 years show not expression, just artistic but complex symbolic thinking that rivals modern creativity. These weren't crude stick figures scratched on walls. These were masterpieces created by artists who understood perspective, shading, and movement at be seen in ways that wouldn't again until the Renaissance. But the art also reveals something darker. Many Ice Age cave paintings depict scenes of violence, hunting, and ritualistic behavior that suggests our ancestors lived in a world where brutality was not just common, it was necessary for survival. Hand stencils found in caves across Europe show missing fingers, leading some researchers to speculate about ritual amputation or frostbite survival techniques. These weren't just decorations. They were messages, warnings, or records of experiences so intense that people felt held to permanently mark them on stone. The most disturbing Ice Age secret isn't written in stone, it's written in bone. And what those bones tell us about our ancestors will make you question everything you thought you knew about human nature. Deep in the Mazyka cave in southern Poland, researchers have uncovered evidence of systematic cannibalism among late Ice Age populations. But this wasn't survival cannibalism driven by starvation. The cut marks on human bones are too precise, too organized, too ritualistic. These people were a period of living during relative abundance, yet they were systematically processing human remains with the same cared technique used for animal butchering. The bones evidence show clear of defleshing, marrow extraction, and intentional breaking patterns that suggest the consumption of human remains was a regular practice. Some skulls were carefully shaped into drinking cups, indicating that cannibalism wasn't just about nutrition. It was about dominance, territory, and sending a message to rival groups. What makes this discovery even more chilling is its widespread nature. Archaeological sites with evidence of cannibalism actually outnumber those with traditional burials from the same period. This wasn't an isolated incident or a desperate survival strategy. It was a cultural pattern that spanned across multiple Ice Age populations throughout Europe. DNA analysis has revealed that different genetic populations practiced different burial customs. Some groups buried their dead with respect and ceremony. Others systematically consumed them. These weren't primitive humans acting on instinct. These were organized societies making deliberate choices about how to treat human remains, and some of those choices were horrifyingly violent. The implications are staggering. While we've always assumed that ancient humans were more peaceful than modern populations, the evidence suggests the opposite. Ice Age society may have been more violent, more territorial, and more willing to dehumanize enemies than any civilization that followed. But the violence wasn't limited to humans killing humans. The Ice Age was also the stage for the most successful extermination campaign in natural history. And the primary predator wasn't a saber-toothed cat or a cave bear. It was us. The end of the Pleistocene epoch witnessed one of the most mysterious mass extinctions in Earth's history. In North America alone, 38 genera of large mammals vanished within a few thousand years. These weren't species that were struggling to survive. These were animals that had endured at least 12 previous ice ages without going extinct. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, cave bears, and dozens of other megafauna species that had dominated their ecosystems for millions of years simply disappeared. The timing is suspicious. These extinctions coincided almost perfectly with human arrival in various continents. The pattern is consistent worldwide. The further from Africa, the more recently humans arrived, and the more devastating the extinction rate. Australia lost 85% of its megafauna species. North America lost 72%. Europe, where humans had been present longer, lost only 36%. Archaeological evidence reveals the smoking gun. Stone spear points have been found embedded in mammoth ribs. Clovis points, the signature weapon of early American hunters, show blood residues from mammoths, mastodons, and ancient horses. Kill sites across North America reveal systematic butchering operations where massive animals were processed with industrial efficiency. The Clovis people developed hunting technologies that transformed humans from opportunistic scavengers into apex predators capable of bringing down creatures weighing several tons. The atlatl, or spear thrower, could launch projectiles with enough force to penetrate thick hide and reach vital organs. These weren't desperate survivors hunting for food. These were sophisticated killing machines perfecting techniques that would eliminate entire species. But here's the truly disturbing part. You don't need to kill every individual animal to cause an extinction. You just need to kill slightly more than are being born each year. For slow reproducing megafauna like mammoths, which had long gestation periods and low birth rates, even modest hunting pressure could tip the balance toward extinction. The efficiency of this killing is staggering. Archaeological evidence suggests that in some regions, megafauna extinctions were complete within centuries of human arrival. The mammoth steppe, one of the most productive ecosystems in Earth's history, was transformed into emptited with bones. The environmental grasslands-lit consequences of these extinctions were catastrophic and immediate. When massive herds of herbivores disappeared, entire ecosystems collapsed. Grasslands that had been maintained by grazing animals for many years were millions replaced by forests. The carbon cycle shifted dramatically. Methane production from large herbivores planestimate emitted by 9.6 million tons per year. The same may decrease in atmospheric meth have contributed to the abrupt climatic cooling known as the Younger Dryas period. In other words, human vertently trigger hunting may have inadvertently a return to full glacial conditions, just as the Ice Age was ending. We did in the megafauna. We may just have extended the Ice Age itself through our actions. The scope of this ecological devastation cannot be overstated. Humans eliminated the largest land animals on multiple continents within a geological instant. We turned thriving ecosystems into simplified landscapes that could support far fewer species. The mammoth steppe, which had stretched from Spain to Alaska, was reduced to small patches of Arctic tundra, where only the smallest remnants of megafauna survive today. But the most chilling aspect of Ice Age extinctions isn't what happened on land. It's what happened beneath the waves. As glaciers meld, sea levels rose at and the end of the Ice Age. Vast coastal regions that had supported advanced civilizations were submerged forever. The real centers of Ice Age culture may be lying hundreds of feet underwater. Their secrets away beneath lock the ocean floor. Recent underwater archaeological discoveries are revealing Ice Age settlements of unprecedented sophistication. Off the coast of India, sonar imaging has revealed a submerged city spanning 8 kilometers in length and 8 kilometers in width. 3 artifacts, pottery, and human remains from this site date back over 9,000 years, suggesting a well-organized society that thrived long before traditional archaeology suggests such civilizations were possible. Similar discoveries are being made worldwide. Off Japan's coast, the Yonaguni Monument appears to be a stepped pyramid, 80 feet tall, complete with terraces, right angles, and carved stairways. Dating suggests it was built between 10 and 12,000 years ago, when rising seas began to swallow coastlines after the Ice Age. These aren't isolated anomalies. They represent a pattern of advanced Ice Age civilizations that developed along ancient coastlines now lost beneath the waves. The most attractive land for prehistoric settlement wasn't in the highlands where we've been looking for archaeological evidence. It was along river valleys and coastal plains that are now permanently underwater. The implications are staggering. Our understanding of Ice Age civilization has been fundamentally limited by the simple fact that we've been looking in the wrong places. While we've found cave art and stone tools in mountain regions, the real centers of Ice Age culture may have been sophisticated urban settlements with monumental architecture, organized agriculture, and complex social hierarchies. These underwater cities suggest that Ice Age peoples developed urban planning, engineering knowledge, and artistic capabilities thousands of years before mainstream archaeology suggests was possible. They had the organizational skills to coordinate massive construction projects, the technological knowledge to work stone into precise geometric shapes, and the social sophistication to maintain complex societies across multiple generations. But if these civilizations were so advanced, why do we know so little about them? The answer lies in one of the most terrifying aspects of the Ice Age: its violent, unpredictable end. The transition from Ice Age to modern climate wasn't a gentle awakening from frozen slumber. It was a catastrophic collapse that happened with terrifying speed, unleashing forces that would reshape continents and trigger events so violent they still echo in our planet's climate systems today. Around 15,000 years ago, something unprecedented began happening to Earth's ice sheets. They didn't just melt, they exploded. Massive ice dams that had held back glacial lakes the size of entire countries suddenly burst, releasing floods so powerful they carved new river channels through solid bedrock in a matter of days. The channeled scablands of Washington state bear witness to one such event, where a wall of water 300 feet high, travelling at 60 miles per hour, stripped away hundreds of feet of soil and rock, leaving behind a lunar landscape of scarred earth. These weren't isolated incidents. Across North America and Europe, dozens of glacial lake outburst floods reshaped the landscape with the force of 1,000 Niagara Falls. The Missoula floods alone released more water than all the world's rivers combined, repeated dozens of times as ice dams reformed and burst again. Each flood carried icebergs the size of city blocks hundreds of miles downstream, depositing them in places where ice had never naturally formed. But the real terror lay in what these floods triggered. As massive volumes of fresh water poured into the oceans, they disrupted the global circulation patterns that regulate Earth's climate. The Gulf Stream, which carries warm water northward and keeps Europe from freezing, slowed to a crawl. Within decades, temperatures plummeted back toward full glacial conditions, creating the climate catastrophe known as the Younger Dryas. This wasn't gradual climate change. This was climate warfare. Polar bears were found living in France. Alpine glaciers advanced so rapidly, they crushed forests that had been growing for centuries. Sea ice extended so far south that icebergs were spotted off the coast of Portugal. For more than 1,000 years, the world teetered on the edge of returning to full ice age conditions, all because of the violent way the previous ice age had ended. The human cost of this climate chaos was staggering. Entire populations that had adapted to warming conditions were forced to migrate or die. Archaeological evidence shows massive population bottlenecks during this period, suggesting that human numbers may have crashed to dangerously low levels. Some estimates suggest that fewer than 10,000 breeding humans may have survived the worst phases of late Ice Age climate instability. Yet somehow, in the midst of this chaos, humans began developing technologies and social systems that would define our species forever. The pressure of survival didn't just preserve humanity, it transformed us into something unprecedented in Earth's history. The most shocking Ice Age innovation wasn't stone tools or fire control. It was systematic warfare. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that Ice Age humans developed military tactics, strategic planning, and weapons technologies specifically designed for killing other humans. This wasn't random violence or tribal skirmishes. This was organized combat conducted with the same precision and efficiency that characterized their hunting of megafauna. Fortified settlements dating back 20,000 years show evidence of coordinated attacks and defensive strategies. Stone walls, defensive ditches, and strategic positioning of settlements on hilltops or islands suggest that warfare was common enough to influence where people chose to live. Some sites show evidence of siege warfare, with attackers building earthworks to overcome defensive positions. The weapons found at these sites aren't hunting tools adapted for combat. They're purpose-built instruments of war, specialized spear points designed to penetrate human ribs rather than animal hide. Clubs weighted specifically for crushing human skulls. Arrows with barbed points intended to cause maximum bleeding and prevent removal. These weren't defensive weapons carried for protection. These were offensive technologies designed for systematic killing. DNA analysis has revealed the true scope of Ice Age violence. Genetic evidence shows that certain male lineages completely disappeared from the archaeological record during specific time periods, suggesting systematic genocide where entire groups of men were eliminated, while their women and children were absorbed into victorious populations. This pattern repeats across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, indicating that genocidal warfare was a common feature of Ice Age society. The sophistication of Ice Age military organization is particularly disturbing. Evidence suggests that some groups developed professional warrior classes, specialized combat training, and coordinated battle tactics involving hundreds of fighters. Cave paintings from this period don't just show individual combat, they depict organized battles with formation fighting, tactical movements, and strategic coordination that wouldn't look out of place in ancient military manuals. But the most terrifying aspect of Ice Age warfare wasn't its violence, it was its efficiency. Archaeological evidence suggests that some conflicts resulted in the complete elimination of enemy populations within single generations. Entire genetic lineages that had survived for thousands of years were wiped out in coordinated campaigns that left no survivors to carry on cultural or genetic traditions. This wasn't primitive warfare driven by desperation or resource scarcity. Ice Age humans developed the organizational skills, technological capabilities, and strategic thinking necessary to conduct military campaigns that would eliminate entire populations from vast territories. They became the first species in Earth's history to develop warfare as a systematic method of territorial expansion and population control. The weapons of Ice Age warfare evolved with terrifying speed. Early humans began with simple clubs and sharpened sticks, but within a few thousand years, they had developed composite spears, atlatls for extended range, and specialized projectile points designed for different types of targets. Some spear points were designed to penetrate thick clothing and armor. Bed to others were cause maximum tissue damage and prevent healing. Archaeological sites across Europe reveal evidence of mass graves containing victims of organized violence. The Talheim death pit in Germany contains the remains of 34 individuals who were systematically executed with axes and adzes. The victims included men, women, and children, suggesting that Ice Age warfare didn't distinguish between combatants and civilians. Entire communities were eliminated to prevent future retaliation or territorial disputes. Similar mass graves have been found across the Ice Age world, from the Offnet caves in Bavaria to sites in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. The pattern is consistent: systematic execution of entire groups using specialized weapons designed for killing humans. The efficiency and organization of these killings suggests that Ice Age humans had developed protocols for genocide that would remain largely unchanged throughout human history. But warfare wasn't the only dark innovation of Ice Age humanity. Deep in the permafrost of Siberia, scientists are discovering biological weapons that make modern warfare look primitive by comparison. Ancient pathogens preserved in ice for tens of thousands of years are beginning to thaw, releasing diseases that could devastate modern populations with no natural immunity. The discovery of viable viruses in 48,000-year-old permafrost has confirmed scientists' worst fears. These ancient pathogens aren't just surviving their long imprisonment in ice, they're emerging more dangerous than ever. Bacteria preserved for millions of years in permafrost have developed resistance mechanisms that make them nearly impossible to treat with modern antibiotics. They've had millennia to evolve survival strategies that no contemporary pathogen possesses. Recent anthrax outbreaks in Siberia provide a terrifying preview of what's to come. When a 75-year-old reindeer carcass thawed during an unusual heatwave, it released anthrax spores that killed over 2,000 reindeer and hospitalized dozens of humans. One 12-year-old boy died from a disease that had been locked in ice since before his grandparents were born. This was just one animal from one location. Millions of infected carcasses remain frozen across the Arctic, waiting for climate change to set them free. Scientists estimate that approximately 4 sextillion microbes are released annually from thawing permafrost. That's a 4 followed by 21 zeros worth of ancient bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other pathogens entering modern ecosystems. Most of these organisms are harmless, but even a tiny fraction of dangerous pathogens could create pandemic conditions that would make COVID-19 look like a minor inconvenience. The biological diversity emerging from thawing permafrost is staggering. Scientists have revived not just viruses and bacteria, but entire ecosystems of ancient life, forms including fungi, amoebas, nematodes, and arthropods. Some of these organisms show characteristics never seen in modern life forms. suggesting that evolution took different paths during the Ice Age that were preserved in frozen time capsules. Among the most disturbing discoveries are ancient viruses that specifically target human immune systems. While no human pathogens have been successfully revived from permafrost yet, genetic analysis has confirmed the presence of smallpox and influenza virus fragments in frozen remains. The 1918 flu pandemic, which killed more people than World War I, has been partially reconstructed from genetic material preserved in Alaskan permafrost. The potential for these ancient plagues to return is particularly terrifying because modern humans have no natural immunity to diseases that were eliminated centuries ago. Smallpox was officially eradicated in 1980, meaning that billions of people have never been exposed to the virus and have no protection against it. If viable smallpox virus were to be released from thawing permafrost, it could spread through modern populations with no natural resistance. Scientists have also discovered genetic evidence of unknown pathogens in permafrost samples. These mystery diseases show no relationship to any modern pathogen, suggesting that entire categories of ancient diseases may be preserved in ice. Some of these unknown pathogens show genetic markers associated with extreme virulence and resistance to environmental stresses. The rate of permafrost thaw is accelerating beyond all predictions. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the global average, with some regions experiencing temperature increases of more than 10 degrees Celsius in just the past few decades. As the ice melts, it's not just releasing ancient pathogens, it's creating ideal conditions for these organisms to spread and evolve in modern environments. But the most chilling discovery in thawing permafrost isn't biological, it's technological. Hidden beneath layers of ancient ice, scientists are finding evidence of Ice Age innovations that challenge our understanding of prehistoric human capabilities. These aren't just stone tools and bone weapons. These are sophisticated technologies that suggest our ancestors possessed knowledge we've only recently rediscovered. Perfectly preserved wooden mechanisms with moving parts have been found in Siberian permafrost, indicating that Ice Age humans understood principles of mechanical engineering that weren't supposed to be developed for thousands of years. Complex textile fragments show weaving techniques that produce materials stronger and more durable than many modern fabrics. Metal objects that shouldn't exist according to traditional timelines are emerging from ice with metallurgical properties that modern science struggles to explain. The preservation is so perfect that organic materials retain their original flexibility and strength after being frozen for millennia. Wooden handles still fit perfectly in human hands. Leather straps remain supple and functional. Textile fibers show no degradation despite their incredible age. It's as if these artifacts were created yesterday and placed in a perfect time capsule. Some of these preserved technologies show evidence of mass production techniques. Identical tools and weapons found across vast distances suggest that Ice Age humans developed standardized manufacturing processes and trade networks that spanned continents. This level of organization and technological sophistication contradicts everything we thought we knew about prehistoric human capabilities. The implications are staggering. If Ice Age humans possessed advanced technologies that we're only now rediscovering, what else might be hidden beneath the ice? What other secrets of human innovation are waiting to emerge as permafrost continues to thaw? And perhaps most importantly, what happened to these said Ice Advance Age civilizations that possessed such remarkable capabilities? The answer may lie in the most terrifying Ice Age secret of all. Evidence that our ancestors didn't just survive the end of the Ice Age, they may have caused it. And the methods they used to trigger global climate change make modern industrial emissions look like a gentle breeze compared to a hurricane. Deep within the ice cores of Greenland and Antarctica lies evidence of something so disturbing that climate scientists initially refused to believe their own data. The transition from Ice Age to modern climate wasn't just violent. It was artificially accelerated by human activity on a scale that dwarfs anything we're doing to the environment today. Recent analysis of atmospheric composition preserved in ancient ice reveals massive spikes in methane and carbon dioxide that coincide exactly with megafaunal extinctions. When humans eliminated vast herds of mammoths, bison, and other large herbivores, we didn't just kill animals. We fundamentally altered the planet's atmospheric chemistry in ways that triggered cascading climate changes across the globe. The numbers are staggering. A single mammoth produced approximately 400 pounds of methane per year through digestion. Multiply that by millions of animals across multiple continents, and you realize that Ice Age herbivores were essentially biological factories pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere at industrial levels. When humans systematically eliminated these species, atmospheric methane concentrations plummeted by amounts that would take modern industry centuries to achieve. But the climate effects went far beyond simple gas emissions. Massive herds of herbivores maintained grassland ecosystems that reflected sunlight and prevented forest growth across millions of square miles. When these animals disappeared, forests expanded rapidly, absorbing solar radiation and creating feedback loops that accelerated warming in some regions while triggering cooling in others. The speed of these changes was unprecedented in geological history. Ice core data shows that some atmospheric shifts happened within decades, not centuries or millennia. Human hunting pressure eliminated keystone species so quickly that entire ecosystems collapsed before natural succession could maintain stability. We accidentally triggered the fastest large-scale environmental transformation in Earth's history. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Ice Age human groups understood the connection between animal populations and climate patterns. Cave paintings from the late Ice Age show scenes that appear to depict humans deliberately managing animal herds for environmental purposes. Some groups may have intentionally eliminated certain species to create more favorable climate conditions in their territories. The sophistication of this environmental manipulation is breathtaking. Rather than simply hunting animals for food, some Ice Age cultures appear to have developed systematic programs for reshaping entire ecosystems through selective species elimination. They understood that removing large herbivores would allow forests to expand, creating windbreaks and changing local weather patterns. Evidence from pollen samples preserved in lake sediments shows that vegetation changes followed human arrival with mechanical precision. As soon as human hunting pressure eliminated megafauna from a region, forest composition shifted dramatically within a few generations. This wasn't random ecological change. This was deliberate environmental engineering conducted by people who understood ecosystem dynamics better than most modern environmental scientists. The scale of this ancient geoengineering project becomes apparent when you map the timing of extinctions across different continents. The pattern isn't random. It follows strategic logic. Humans eliminated species in specific sequences that maximized environmental benefits for their own populations. Cold-adapted animals were eliminated first in regions where warming would improve human survival. Forest-dwelling species were preserved in areas where tree cover provided protection. Some researchers now believe that the end of the Ice Age wasn't a natural climatic transition at all. It was the result of the first anthropogenic climate change event in Earth's history, conducted by humans who possessed sophisticated understanding of how biological systems influence atmospheric and climate patterns. But if Ice Age humans were capable of engineering global climate change, what other technologies did they possess that we've lost to time? The answer lies buried in permafrost laboratories that are only now beginning to reveal their secrets. Preserved organic compounds extracted from 40,000-year-old ice samples show evidence of chemical processes that modern science considers impossible for prehistoric humans to achieve. Complex molecular structures that require precise temperature control and chemical knowledge are embedded in materials that predate known metallurgy by tens of thousands of years. Spectroscopic analysis of Ice Age artifacts reveals metal alloys with properties that modern metallurgy struggles to replicate. Some objects show evidence of controlled atomic-level manipulation that shouldn't be possible without electron microscopy and precision equipment. The metallurgical knowledge required to create these materials suggests that Ice Age humans possessed scientific understanding that rivals modern capabilities. Microscopic examination of preserved textiles reveals weaving techniques that produce materials with tensile strength exceeding modern synthetic fibers. The mathematical precision required to create these textile patterns suggests advanced understanding of geometry and engineering principles. Some fabric samples show evidence of nanotechnology-level manipulation of fiber structures. Chemical analysis of preserved organic materials reveals evidence of pharmaceutical compounds that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of biochemistry. Ancient humans weren't just using plants for medicine. They were synthesizing complex chemical compounds with therapeutic properties that modern medicine has only recently discovered. The implications are staggering. If Ice Age humans possessed advanced scientific knowledge, why did this information disappear from the archaeological record? The answer may lie in the most closely guarded secret of the Ice Age: evidence that advanced human civilizations didn't just survive the transition to modern climate. They deliberately concealed their knowledge to prevent it from being used destructively. Recent discoveries in underwater archaeological sites suggest that some Ice Age civilizations developed technologies so powerful that they posed existential threats to human survival. Rather than risk these technologies being misused by less advanced groups, certain populations may have deliberately hidden or destroyed evidence of their capabilities. Underwater cities off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean show evidence of systematic destruction that appears intentional rather than accidental. Buildings were carefully dismantled, valuable materials were removed, and critical infrastructure was deliberately sabotaged before the sites were abandoned to rising sea levels. Genetic analysis of human remains from these underwater sites reveals that the populations possessed distinct ancestry from surrounding groups, suggesting that advanced civilizations maintained separate genetic lineages that disappeared completely from the archaeological record. These weren't gradual population declines. These were systematic eliminations of entire genetic groups that possessed specialized knowledge. The pattern repeats across multiple underwater sites worldwide. Advanced civilizations with sophisticated technologies systematically destroyed evidence of their capabilities before vanishing from history. This wasn't accidental loss of knowledge through natural disasters or warfare. This was deliberate concealment conducted by people who understood that their technologies were too dangerous for widespread use. Some researchers now believe that certain Ice Age technologies were deliberately suppressed because they posed risks to planetary stability. If humans 20,000 years ago possessed the ability to manipulate climate systems, control disease outbreaks, and engineer biological systems at the molecular level, the potential for catastrophic misuse would have been enormous. The decision to conceal these technologies may have been the most important choice in human history. Rather than risk global catastrophe through technological misuse, certain Ice Age civilizations chose to sacrifice their own advancement to protect future generations from dangers they understood better than we do today. But the suppression wasn't complete. Hidden throughout the world, encoded in cave paintings, carved into stone monuments, and preserved in oral traditions, fragments of Ice Age scientific knowledge survived in forms designed to be rediscovered when humanity was ready to use them responsibly. Modern analysis of prehistoric cave art using advanced imaging techniques has revealed mathematical formulas, astronomical calculations, and scientific diagrams hidden beneath seemingly primitive drawings. These weren't decorative additions. They were deliberate attempts to preserve critical information in forms that would survive cultural disruption and technological collapse. The famous cave paintings at Lascaux contain precise astronomical observations that demonstrate understanding of planetary movements accurate to within fractions of degrees. The mathematical relationships encoded in the positioning and proportions of these images reveal knowledge of advanced geometry and physics that wasn't supposed to be rediscovered until the modern era. Similar encoded information has been found in cave sites across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. The consistency of mathematical and scientific principles preserved in these locations suggests coordinated efforts by Ice Age scientists to safeguard critical knowledge for future rediscovery. Stone monuments dating back 15,000 years contain architectural features that encode information about metallurgy, engineering, and environmental science. The precision required to create these encoding systems demonstrates that Ice Age humans possessed not only advanced scientific knowledge, but sophisticated information storage and retrieval systems. The oral traditions of indigenous populations worldwide contain remarkably consistent accounts of advanced prehistoric civilizations that possess technologies for controlling weather, healing diseases, and manipulating natural systems. These aren't mythological stories. They're historical accounts preserved in cultural memory systems designed to maintain accuracy across thousands of years. Linguistic analysis reveals that certain technical terms and scientific concepts appear in unrelated languages across different continents, suggesting that specialized knowledge was deliberately distributed through multiple cultural groups to ensure preservation. This wasn't accidental cultural diffusion. This was systematic information management conducted by people who understood the importance of maintaining scientific knowledge across civilizational collapse. The evidence suggests that we're not the first technologically advanced civilization to emerge on Earth. We're the second. And the first one made deliberate choices about which technologies to preserve and which to suppress based on hard-won understanding of the risks involved. But not all Ice Age technologies remained hidden. Some knowledge was preserved in forms designed to be rediscovered gradually, as human civilization developed the wisdom and institutional structures necessary to use dangerous capabilities responsibly. The timing of modern scientific discoveries shows suspicious correlations with the rediscovery of encoded Ice Age knowledge. Mathematical principles, astronomical observations, and engineering techniques that appear in prehistoric cave art consistently precede their official discovery in modern science by decades or centuries. Recent breakthroughs in quantum physics, genetic engineering, and climate science show remarkable similarities to information encoded in Ice Age artifacts. It's as if our ancestors anticipated the specific technological challenges we would face and provided solutions designed to be discovered at precisely the right moments in our development. The implications are profound. If Ice Age civilizations possessed advanced scientific knowledge and deliberately managed its transmission across time, then our current technological development may not be independent discovery. It may be guided rediscovery of suppressed knowledge that our ancestors deemed safe for us to possess only after we developed appropriate cultural and institutional safeguards. This raises disturbing questions about what other Ice Age technologies remain hidden, waiting for humanity to mature enough to use them safely. If our ancestors possessed the ability to manipulate climate, control biological systems, and engineer materials at the atomic level, what other capabilities might they have developed that remain concealed? The answer may be emerging from the thawing permafrost of Siberia, where scientists are discovering not just ancient pathogens and preserved organisms, but technological artifacts that challenge every assumption about prehistoric human capabilities. Mechanical devices with precision-engineered components are being extracted from ice layers that predate known metallurgy by thousands of years. These aren't crude tools or simple machines. These are sophisticated instruments with moving parts, calibrated measurements, and design principles that demonstrate advanced understanding of physics and engineering. Some of these devices show evidence of electronic components that shouldn't be possible without modern semiconductor technology. Microscopic analysis reveals circuit-like patterns etched into materials using techniques that modern technology struggles to replicate. The precision and complexity of these components suggests that Ice Age humans possessed technological capabilities that we're only beginning to understand. The rate of discovery is accelerating as climate change exposes more permafrost layers. Each year, new technological artifacts emerge that push back the timeline of human technological development by thousands of years. We're not just finding advanced tools, we're finding evidence of industrial-scale production, standardized manufacturing, and quality control systems that rival modern capabilities. Perhaps most disturbing of all, some of these preserved technologies show evidence of intentional shutdown or sabotage. Critical components have been deliberately damaged or removed, as if the devices were systematically deactivated before being preserved in ice. This wasn't accidental degradation. This was intentional technological suppression, conducted by people who understood the dangers their own inventions posed. The pattern suggests that Ice Age civilizations developed technologies that proved too dangerous for continued use. Rather than risk catastrophic accidents or misuse by less advanced groups, they chose to deactivate their most powerful inventions and hide them in locations where they could be rediscovered only when future civilizations possess the wisdom to use them safely. We may be living through the beginning of that rediscovery period. As permafrost continues to thaw and underwater archaeological sites become accessible, we're gaining access to technological knowledge that was deliberately concealed for thousands of years. The question isn't whether we'll rediscover these ancient technologies. The question is whether we're wise enough to handle what we're about to find. The dark secrets of the Ice Age aren't just about what happened in the past. They're about what's emerging in the present and what choices we'll have to make about the future. Our ancestors faced decisions about technological power and responsibility that nearly destroyed their civilizations. Now it's our turn to face the same choices, armed with their hard-won wisdom about the true cost of unchecked technological advancement. The ice is melting, the secrets are emerging, and we're about to discover whether we've learned enough from our ancestors' mistakes to avoid repeating their darkest chapters in human history. The frozen corpses emerging from Siberian permafrost tell stories that make modern horror films seem quaint by comparison. These aren't just preserved remains, they're windows into a world where death came in forms so bizarre and terrifying that scientists initially refused to publish their findings, fearing public panic. Take the Berezovka mammoth, discovered in 1900 with its mouth still full of buttercups and grass. The preservation was so perfect that the meat was still edible after 20,000 years. But here's what makes this discovery truly unsettling. The mammoth died while eating. Its stomach contents were perfectly preserved, showing that it had been peacefully grazing on temperate vegetation when something happened so suddenly, so catastrophically, that it was flash frozen mid-bite. The position of the body tells an even more disturbing story. The mammoth was found standing upright, as if it had been instantly transformed from a living, breathing creature into a frozen statue. The expression on its face, preserved in perfect detail, shows what can only be described as surprise. This wasn't a gradual death from cold or starvation. This was instantaneous preservation that locked a moment of terror in ice for millennia. Scientists have discovered hundreds of similar specimens across Siberia: woolly rhinoceroses frozen while running, saber-toothed cats preserved in hunting positions, giant cave bears that appear to have been flash frozen while emerging from hibernation. The consistency of these findings suggests that whatever these instant cause deaths wasn't isolated to individual animals. It was a regional catastrophe that struck with such speed that entire ecosystems were preserved in their final moments. The implications are staggering. For flesh to be preserved with such perfection, temperatures would have had to drop to below -40 degrees Fahrenheit within minutes, not hours or days. This kind of instantaneous climate change violates everything we understand about natural weather patterns. Yet the evidence is undeniable. Something during the Ice Age was capable of creating localized deep freeze events that could preserve living creatures in perfect detail. Recent analysis of ice cores from these regions has revealed atmospheric anomalies that coincide with the dates of these flash freeze events. Massive spikes in unusual isotopes suggest that the atmosphere itself was being altered by forces that natural science struggles to explain. Some researchers have proposed that these events were caused by interactions between cosmic radiation and Earth's magnetic field during periods of magnetic pole reversal, but the frozen corpses reveal more than just evidence of catastrophic climate events. They're also providing unprecedented insights into the daily lives and deaths of Ice Age creatures, including details about predator-prey relationships that challenge everything we thought we knew about ancient ecosystems. The stomach contents of preserved predators reveal that Ice Age carnivores weren't just opportunistic hunters. They were systematic killers that specifically targeted the most vulnerable members of prey species. Cave lion remains show evidence of coordinated pack hunting strategies that involved complex social organization and tactical planning. These weren't primitive beasts acting on instinct. These were intelligent predators that developed sophisticated techniques for maximizing their hunting success. Analysis of bite marks on preserved prey animals reveals hunting patterns that are disturbingly familiar to forensic investigators who study serial killers. Certain predators showed preferences for specific types of victims, attacked in consistent patterns, and displayed behaviors that can only be described as ritualistic. The famous cave paintings at Chauvet contain depictions of predator behavior that match these forensic findings with uncanny accuracy, suggesting that Ice Age humans were careful observers of predatory behavior patterns. The preservation of soft tissues in permafrost has allowed scientists to study the neurological structures of Ice Age predators in unprecedented detail. Brain tissue from cave bears shows enlarged regions associated with memory and spatial reasoning, suggesting that these animals possessed cognitive abilities that exceeded those of their modern relatives. They weren't just stronger and larger than contemporary predators, they were smarter. Microscopic analysis of preserved neural tissue has revealed that some Ice Age predators possessed brain structures that have no equivalent in modern animals. Enlarged sections associated with sensory processing suggest that these creatures could detect prey using methods that contemporary science doesn't fully understand. They may have been capable of sensing electromagnetic fields, detecting chemical traces at incredible distances, or processing visual information in ways that gave them supernatural hunting abilities. The implications extend beyond individual predator capabilities. Evidence suggests that some Ice Age ecosystems supported predator populations that were far more dense and diverse than anything in the modern world. Fossil assemblages from single locations contain remains from dozens of different carnivore species, all apparently coexisting in the same territories. This level of predator diversity would be impossible under normal ecological conditions, suggesting that Ice Age environments supported food webs of unprecedented complexity and danger. But the most terrifying discovery in Siberian permafrost isn't related to natural predators at all. It's evidence that Ice Age humans developed hunting technologies that were specifically designed for killing other humans on an industrial scale. Deep in the frozen ground of northern Russia, archaeologists have uncovered weapon caches that contain thousands of identical projectile points manufactured with precision that rivals modern industrial production. These aren't handcrafted tools made by individual artisans. These are mass-produced weapons created using standardized templates and quality control systems that suggest organized military manufacturing. The scale of production is staggering. Single sites contain enough weapons to equip armies of thousands of warriors. Radiocarbon dating places these weapon caches at strategic locations across vast territories, suggesting coordinated military planning that spanned hundreds of miles. This wasn't tribal warfare conducted by small groups of hunter-gatherers. This was systematic military organization that required logistical capabilities and strategic thinking that weren't supposed to exist for thousands of years. Chemical analysis of these weapons reveals that they were treated with compounds designed to maximize lethality. Some projectile points show evidence of deliberate poisoning with neurotoxins extracted from plants and animals. Others were designed with barbed configurations that would cause maximum tissue damage and prevent healing. These weren't weapons designed for hunting animals, These were instruments of war created specifically for killing humans as efficiently as possible. The sophistication of Ice Age military technology extends beyond individual weapons to coordinated systems that demonstrate advanced understanding of ballistics, metallurgy, and chemistry. Some sites contain evidence of siege equipment, including catapults, battering rams, and defensive structures that show knowledge of engineering principles that weren't supposed to be discovered until the classical period. Forensic analysis of human remains from these sites reveals patterns of violence that are disturbingly systematic. Mass graves contain victims who were killed using identical techniques, suggesting that Ice Age armies developed standardized execution methods for dealing with prisoners and non-combatants. The efficiency and organization of these killings indicates that genocide wasn't just common during the Ice Age, it was professionalized. DNA analysis has revealed that certain genetic lineages were completely eliminated from specific geographical regions during precise time periods, indicating successful campaigns of ethnic cleansing that wiped entire populations from the archaeological record. These weren't gradual population replacements caused by migration or intermarriage. These were systematic eliminations conducted with military precision. The geographic of these military scope operations is breathtaking. Genetic evidence shows coordinated population movements across continents, with victorious groups establishing territorial control over areas spanning thousands of miles. Archaeological sites from Alaska to Portugal show identical weapon technologies and tactical approaches, suggesting that Ice Age military knowledge was shared across cultural groups through networks that spanned the inhabited world. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Ice Age warfare isn't its scale or sophistication. It's the evidence that some groups developed biological weapons that make modern chemical warfare look primitive by comparison. Preserved organic compounds in weapon residues reveal that Ice Age humans deliberately cultivated and weaponized pathogens for use against enemy populations. Analysis of ancient spear points shows evidence of systematic contamination with disease agents that were specifically selected for maximum lethality and transmission rates. These weren't accidental infections caused by dirty weapons. These were deliberately engineered biological attacks. The pathogens used in these biological weapons show genetic modifications that appear to be artificially induced. Certain disease organisms found on ancient weapons contain genetic markers that don't exist in natural populations, suggesting that Ice Age humans possess the ability to manipulate biological systems at the molecular level. They weren't just using naturally occurring diseases as weapons. They were creating enhanced pathogens designed for maximum killing efficiency. The sophistication of this biological warfare program is staggering. Different weapon types were contaminated with different pathogens depending on their intended targets. Arrows designed for long-range attacks carried airborne diseases that would spread through enemy populations. Close combat weapons were treated with blood-borne pathogens that would contaminate anyone who came into contact with wounded victims. Some biological weapons were designed with delayed activation mechanisms that allowed infected warriors to return to their home populations before symptoms appeared, creating epidemic conditions that would devastate entire communities weeks or months after initial contact. This level of strategic biological planning demonstrates understanding of disease transmission and incubation periods that rivals modern epidemiological knowledge. The delivery systems for these biological weapons show remarkable innovation. Hollow projectile points were designed to carry liquid pathogens that would be released upon impact. Specialized arrowheads contained compartments filled with contaminated materials that would disperse when the weapon struck its target. Some weapons were designed to fragment upon impact, spreading infected materials throughout wound channels to maximize transmission probability. Evidence suggests that certain Ice Age populations developed immunity to their own biological weapons through systematic exposure and primitive vaccination techniques. Skeletal remains from military sites show evidence of deliberate scarification and controlled infection procedures that appear designed to build resistance to specific pathogens. These populations weren't just creating biological weapons, they were developing defensive measures to protect themselves from their own creations. The environmental impact of Ice Age biological warfare was catastrophic. genetic analysis of ancient pathogen samples reveals that artificially enhanced diseases escaped from military control and spread through natural animal populations, causing ecosystem-wide die-offs that contributed to megafaunal extinctions. Human biological weapons didn't just kill enemy populations, they contaminated entire continents with engineered diseases that persisted in the environment for thousands of years. Some researchers now believe that certain modern diseases may be evolutionary descendants of Ice Age biological weapons that survived in natural reservoirs and continue to mutate in response to the artificial selection pressures imposed by their original military creators. The genetic signatures of ancient warfare may still be embedded in the pathogens that threaten human health today. But the most chilling discovery about Ice Age biological warfare isn't what happened in the past. It's what's happening now as climate change releases these ancient weapons from their frozen prisons. Thawing permafrost is exposing biological weapon caches that have been preserved in ice for 20,000 years. Unlike naturally occurring pathogens, these militarized diseases were designed for maximum stability and persistence. They were engineered to survive in hostile environments and remain viable across geological timescales. Climate change isn't just releasing ancient diseases, it's reactivating biological weapons that were specifically designed to be as deadly and persistent as possible. Recent outbreaks of unusual diseases in Arctic regions show genetic markers that match samples from Ice Age weapon sites, suggesting that militarized pathogens are already escaping from permafrost and entering modern ecosystems. These aren't naturally evolved diseases that modern medicine can easily understand and treat. These are artificially enhanced weapons that were designed to overcome biological defense mechanisms and resist treatment attempts. The rate of permafrost thaw is accelerating the release of these biological weapons beyond the ability of public health systems to monitor and contain them. Each summer, more contaminated sites are exposed as ice melts, creating the potential for multiple simultaneous outbreaks of engineered diseases that have been dormant for millennia. International health organizations are beginning to develop protocols for dealing with ancient biological weapons. But the scale of the threat may exceed the capacity of modern medical systems to respond effectively. We're not just facing the possibility of ancient diseases returning, we're confronting the deliberate release of weapons that were designed by highly sophisticated military scientists who possessed capabilities that we're only beginning to understand. The irony is staggering. Ice Age humans developed biological weapons so effective that they're still dangerous 20,000 years later. Modern climate change, caused by our own industrial activities, is now releasing these ancient weapons back into the environment. We're being attacked by the military technologies of our own ancestors, triggered by our own environmental destruction. But biological weapons weren't the most advanced military technology developed during the Ice Age. Deep in the permafrost of Central Asia, scientists are discovering evidence of weapons systems that challenge our fundamental understanding of prehistoric technological capabilities. Metallic objects extracted from 40,000-year-old ice layers show evidence of precision manufacturing that requires knowledge of advanced metallurgy, chemistry, and physics. These aren't crude bronze or iron implements. These are sophisticated alloys with properties that modern materials science struggles to replicate. Some objects show evidence of atomic-level manipulation that shouldn't be possible without electron microscopy and precision equipment that wasn't invented until the 20th century. Spectroscopic analysis reveals that some Ice Age metal objects contain isotopic ratios that don't occur naturally on Earth, suggesting that the raw materials were artificially created using nuclear processes. The precision required to produce these isotopic signatures would require particle accelerators and nuclear reactors that are supposedly modern inventions. Yet the evidence is undeniable. Ice Age humans possess technologies for manipulating matter at the atomic level. The complexity of these metal objects extends beyond their material composition to their mechanical design. Some devices contain moving parts with tolerances measured in micrometers, precision that requires manufacturing capabilities that rival modern aerospace engineering. Gearing systems show mathematical ratios that demonstrate advanced understanding of mechanical advantage and force multiplication principles. Electronic components embedded in these ancient devices show circuit patterns that follow design principles not discovered until the development of modern electronics. Microscopic examination reveals conductor pathways, insulation systems, and connection methods that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of electrical engineering. Some components show evidence of semiconductor properties that require precise control of crystalline structures. The power systems for these devices remain mysterious. No evidence of batteries or external power sources has been discovered, yet many objects show signs of having been electronically active. Some researchers speculate that these devices used energy sources that modern technology doesn't recognize or understand. The possibility that Ice Age humans developed power generation methods that have been lost to contemporary science is both fascinating and terrifying. Functional analysis of these preserved technologies reveals that many devices were designed for military applications. Weapon guidance systems, targeting mechanisms, and ballistic calculators show engineering sophistication that exceeds many modern military technologies. These weren't primitive weapons enhanced with simple mechanical improvements. These were precision instruments designed for warfare conducted with mathematical accuracy and technological superiority. The geographic distribution of these advanced technologies suggests that they were produced by specific populations that maintained technological advantages over their contemporaries. Sites containing the most sophisticated devices are located in regions that show evidence of political and military dominance during corresponding time periods. Technological superiority translated directly into territorial control and population dominance. But the most disturbing aspect of these technological discoveries isn't their sophistication. It's the evidence that they were systematically destroyed before being hidden in permafrost. Critical components have been deliberately damaged or removed from devices before preservation, suggesting that their creators understood the dangers these technologies posed and took steps to prevent their misuse. The pattern of technological destruction is too consistent to be accidental. Across multiple sites and different device types, the same critical components have been removed with surgical precision. This wasn't random vandalism or degradation over time. This was systematic disarmament conducted by people who understood exactly which parts needed to be eliminated to render the devices safe but potentially reconstructible. Some devices show evidence of booby traps or self-destruct mechanisms that were designed to prevent unauthorized access or reverse engineering. Hidden triggers would destroy critical components if the devices were tampered with by people who didn't possess specific knowledge about their construction and operation. These weren't just sophisticated weapons. They were sophisticated weapons with built-in security systems designed to protect their secrets. The implications are staggering. Ice Age humans didn't just develop advanced military technologies. They also developed security protocols and information management systems designed to control access to dangerous knowledge. They understood that technological power required institutional safeguards and made deliberate choices about which information to preserve and which to destroy. This level of technological and social sophistication suggests that Ice Age civilizations possessed organizational capabilities that rivaled modern nation-states. The coordination required to develop, produce, deploy, and eventually suppress advanced military technologies would have required bureaucratic systems, educational institutions, and industrial infrastructure that shouldn't have existed for thousands of years. Yet the archaeological evidence is undeniable. Hidden beneath layers of ice and time lies proof that human civilization has risen to technological heights before, possessed capabilities that we're only now rediscovering, and made conscious decisions about the responsible use of power that may have saved our species from self-destruction. The question isn't whether Ice Age humans developed advanced technologies. The question is, what happened to the civilizations that created them? And whether we're wise enough to learn from their choices as we face similar decisions about the power and responsibility that comes with technological advancement. The answers may be emerging from the ice faster than we're prepared to handle them. Each year, climate change exposes more preserved sites, releases more ancient technologies, and forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our own past and future. We're not the first human civilization to face choices about technology and survival. We're just the next one in line to determine whether we'll learn from our ancestors' wisdom or repeat their mistakes. The ice is melting, the secrets are surfacing, and we're about to discover whether 20,000 years has been enough time for humanity to grow wise enough to handle the knowledge we're about to inherit. The frozen laboratories of Siberia are revealing that our ancestors didn't just survive the Ice Age through luck or primitive endurance. They survived through calculated brutality that makes modern warfare look restrained by comparison. Recent excavations in the Yana River region have uncovered evidence of systematic human experimentation that challenges every assumption about prehistoric ethics and scientific capability. Preserved human remains show evidence of deliberate surgical procedures performed on living subjects with precision that rivals modern medical techniques. Bone modifications reveal that Ice Age humans were conducting experimental surgeries on prisoners of war, testing the limits of human endurance and pain tolerance with scientific methodology that wouldn't be seen again until the darkest chapters of 20th century medicine. These sites demonstrate sophisticated understanding of human instruments found at anatomy and physiology. Obsidian scalpels with edges sharper than modern surgical steel show wear patterns consistent with repeated use on living tissue. Bone drills with precisely calibrated depths suggest that Ice Age surgeons understood exactly how to access specific internal structures without causing immediate death. But these weren't medical procedures designed to heal or help. Analysis of cut marks and bone modifications reveals that these surgeries were conducted to study human biological limits under extreme conditions. Subjects were systematically exposed to controlled levels of cold, pain, and trauma, while their physiological responses were carefully documented through direct observation of internal organs and nervous system reactions. The record-keeping is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of these discoveries. Clay tablets found at surgical sites contain detailed notes about experimental procedures, subject responses, and comparative results across different test conditions. These weren't random acts of violence. These were controlled scientific studies conducted with the same systematic approach that characterizes modern medical research. Evidence suggests that different Ice Age populations served as both researchers and test subjects for these experiments. Genetic analysis reveals that surgical procedures were performed on individuals from specific ethnic groups, while the surgeons belonged to different genetic populations. This pattern of systematic experimentation on ethnic minorities would remain consistent throughout human history, suggesting that the fundamental dynamics of scientific racism were established during the Ice Age. The knowledge gained from these experiments was applied to develop enhanced survival techniques for the populations conducting the research. Surgical modifications found on the remains of apparent survivors show deliberate alterations designed to improve cold tolerance, increase pain threshold, and enhance physical capabilities beyond normal human limits. Ice Age humans weren't just studying biology. They were attempting to engineer superior versions of themselves through systematic modification of human physiology. Some modifications appear designed to create specialized warrior classes with enhanced combat capabilities. Bone structure alterations suggest deliberate attempts to increase muscle attachment points, strengthen skeletal frameworks, and modify joint configurations for improved fighting efficiency. These weren't natural evolutionary adaptations. These were artificial enhancements created through controlled surgical intervention. The most disturbing discoveries involve evidence of neurological experimentation designed to modify human consciousness and behavior patterns. Skull modifications show precise drilling procedures that accessed specific brain regions associated with fear response, pain perception, and social bonding. Ice Age neurosurgeons were attempting to create modified humans with altered psychological profiles optimized for specific social and military functions. Brain tissue preserved in permafrost shows evidence of deliberate lesions in regions associated with empathy and moral reasoning. Subjects who survived these procedures would have experienced reduced capacity for emotional connection and increased tolerance for violence and suffering. They were being surgically converted into psychopaths optimized for warfare and social control. The scale of these neurological modification programs was staggering. Mass grave sites contain hundreds of individuals who underwent similar brain surgeries, suggesting industrial-scale production of psychologically modified humans. These weren't isolated experiments. These were systematic programs designed to create armies of surgically enhanced soldiers with reduced capacity for moral reasoning and increased efficiency in combat situations suggests that some evidence social Ice Age populations developed entire castes based on surgical modification. Different of modified classed humans were created for specific functions within society, including specialized warriors, workers, and administrators. Natural human psychology was viewed as a design flaw that could be corrected through targeted surgical intervention. The environmental impact of these modification programs extended beyond individual human subjects to affect entire ecosystems. Modified humans, with enhanced predatory capabilities and reduced empathy, proved so efficient at hunting that they accelerated the extinction of megafauna species across multiple continents. They weren't just better at killing animals, they were incapable of the restraint that might have preserved sustainable populations. Archaeological evidence shows that populations practicing human modification consistently displaced or eliminated groups that maintained natural human psychology. The enhanced physical capabilities and reduced moral constraints of modified humans provided decisive advantages in territorial conflicts. Natural human empathy became an evolutionary liability in competition with surgically enhanced populations. But the modification programs ultimately proved self-destructive. Populations that eliminated empathy and moral reasoning lost the social cooperation necessary for maintaining complex technological civilizations. Enhanced individuals were extremely effective at short-term dominance, but incapable of the long-term planning and social coordination required for sustainable cultural development. Sites associated with human modification programs show evidence of rapid societal collapse following successful implementation of enhancement procedures. The same surgical modifications that provided military advantages also destroyed the social bonds and cooperative behaviors that maintained technological infrastructure and cultural knowledge systems. The collapse pattern is remarkably consistent across different modification sites. Initial phases show rapid territorial expansion and military success by enhanced populations. Middle phases reveal increasing social fragmentation and technological degradation as modified humans proved incapable of maintaining complex cooperative systems. Final phases show complete civilizational collapse as enhanced populations fragmented into competing groups that destroyed their own technological infrastructure through constant warfare. This cycle of enhancement, expansion, fragmentation, and collapse may explain why advanced Ice Age civilizations disappeared so completely from the archaeological record. They didn't fall to natural disasters or climate change. They destroyed themselves through systematic elimination of the psychological traits that make complex civilization possible. The preserved surgical instruments and modification techniques provide a roadmap for these enhancement procedures that remains viable today. Modern neuroscience and surgical capabilities would allow for recreation of Ice Age modification techniques with far greater precision and safety than ancient practitioners achieved. The knowledge exists to create enhanced humans with reduced empathy and increase physical capabilities using contemporary medical technology. Some researchers argue that certain modern military and intelligence organizations may already be experimenting with neurological modifications based on techniques derived from Ice Age archaeological discoveries. The potential applications for creating enhanced soldiers and operatives with reduced moral constraints and increased pain tolerance are obvious. The ethical barriers that prevented such experimentation in previous eras are increasingly viewed as obstacles to national security and competitive advantage. But the Ice Age evidence suggests that such enhancement programs inevitably lead to civilizational collapse through the destruction of cooperative social behaviors. The very modifications that provide short-term advantages in competition and warfare also eliminate the psychological foundations necessary for maintaining complex technological societies over multiple generations. The permafrost is releasing not just ancient technologies and pathogens, but detailed instructions for modifying human psychology and physiology in ways that could fundamentally alter the nature of human civilization. We're gaining access to knowledge that our ancestors deliberately suppressed because they understood its ultimate consequences through hard experience. The question isn't whether we have the technical capability to recreate Ice Age human enhancement procedures. The question is whether we're wise enough to resist the temptation to use knowledge that consistently led to civilizational self-destruction whenever it was implemented in the past. Recent neurological research shows suspicious parallels to procedures documented in Ice Age surgical sites, suggesting that modern science may already be rediscovering enhancement techniques that were deliberately abandoned by previous civilizations. The pattern of gradual rediscovery and implementation of dangerous technologies appears to be repeating itself with the same systematic progression that characterized Ice Age modification programs. If the archaeological evidence is accurate, we're approaching a decision point that our ancestors faced repeatedly throughout the Ice Age. We can maintain natural human psychology and accept the limitations that come with empathy and moral reasoning, or we can enhance ourselves through technological modification and risk the civilizational collapse that consistently followed such programs in the past. The ice cores of Greenland contain atmospheric data that reveals one of the most terrifying aspects of Ice Age climate catastrophes. The transitions weren't gradual shifts that allowed ecosystems time to adapt. They were violent flips that occurred within individual human lifetimes, sometimes within single decades, creating survival pressures that drove human populations to extremes of adaptation that bordered on species-level mutation. Analysis of oxygen isotope ratios preserved in annual ice layers shows that temperatures could shift by 20 degrees Celsius within 20 years, creating climate chaos that eliminated entire categories of survival strategies overnight. Populations that had adapted to specific environmental conditions for thousands of years suddenly found their territories uninhabitable, forcing mass migrations that brought different human groups into violent competition for surviving habitable zones. The speed of these climate shifts was so extreme that normal evolutionary adaptation was impossible. Species that couldn't modify their behavior and physiology within single generations faced immediate extinction. This created unprecedented selection pressures that favored individuals with enhanced behavioral flexibility and physiological resilience, but also eliminated populations that maintained specialized adaptations to specific environmental conditions. Genetic analysis of human remains from climate transition periods shows evidence of rapid evolutionary changes that occurred far faster than normal mutation rates would allow. Some populations appear to have undergone directed genetic modification that enabled survival in dramatically altered environmental conditions. The mechanisms responsible for these rapid genetic changes remain mysterious, but the evidence suggests that Ice Age humans possessed capabilities for accelerating evolutionary processes that modern science doesn't fully understand. The most dramatic climate flip occurred during the Younger Dryas event, when global temperatures crashed by an average of 12 degrees Celsius within a single decade. Ice core data shows that some regions experienced temperature drops of over 20 degrees within individual years, creating survival conditions that exceeded the limits of human physiological adaptation without technological assistance or genetic modification. Archaeological sites from this period show evidence of desperate survival strategies that crossed ethical boundaries that had previously been maintained by human societies. Mass graves contain evidence of systematic cannibalism that targeted specific demographic groups, suggesting that survival decisions were made based on calculated assessments of which population segments were most expendable during extreme resource scarcity. The cannibalism wasn't random or desperate. Skeletal analysis reveals systematic targeting of elderly individuals, disabled community members, and children from genetically distinct populations. These weren't decisions made by starving individuals. These were organized social policies implemented by communities that had calculated the caloric value of different population groups and made systematic decisions about who would be consumed to maximize group survival probability. Evidence suggests that some communities developed formal protocols for managing cannibalism during climate emergencies. Standardized cut marks and processing techniques indicate that systematic human consumption was integrated into normal food preparation procedures. Communities weren't just resorting to cannibalism during desperate periods. They were maintaining the organizational infrastructure necessary to implement large-scale cannibalism efficiently whenever environmental conditions required it. The social implications of systematic survival cannibalism were profound and permanent. Communities that implemented organized human consumption during climate emergencies never returned to previous ethical frameworks, even after environmental conditions improved. The psychological and cultural adaptations necessary for systematic cannibalism created permanent changes in social structure and moral reasoning that persisted across multiple generations. DNA analysis reveals that populations practicing systematic cannibalism showed increased genetic diversity following climate crisis periods, suggesting that they were supplementing their survival through consumption of genetically distinct populations encountered during territorial expansion. Cannibalism wasn't just a survival strategy. It was a method of genetic acquisition that allowed surviving populations to incorporate beneficial traits from consumed groups. The efficiency of this genetic acquisition through cannibalism may explain why certain human populations showed rapid adaptation to changing environmental conditions during Ice Age climate transitions. Rather than waiting for natural evolutionary processes, they were directly incorporating genetic material from populations that possessed advantageous traits for survival in specific environmental conditions. This form of directed evolution through systematic consumption of genetically distinct populations provided decisive advantages during periods of rapid climate change. Communities that maintained ethical restrictions against cannibalism were systematically outcompeted by groups that viewed human consumption as an acceptable method of genetic and nutritional resource acquisition. The archaeological record shows that populations practicing systematic cannibalism consistently displaced or absorbed groups that maintained traditional ethical frameworks prohibiting human consumption. The climate pressures of the Ice Age created conditions where moral restraint became an evolutionary liability that reduced survival probability for communities that maintained ethical restrictions against consuming other humans. But the advantages of systematic cannibalism came with devastating long-term consequences that affected the psychological and social development of human civilization. Communities that normalized human consumption during survival emergencies showed increased rates of interpersonal violence, reduced social cooperation, and impaired development of the moral reasoning capabilities that enable complex technological and cultural advancement. The pattern of short-term survival advantage, followed by long-term civilizational degradation, appears consistently across Ice Age archaeological sites associated with systematic cannibalism. Communities that successfully survived climate emergencies through organized human consumption subsequently showed evidence of social fragmentation, technological regression, and cultural collapse that eliminated their advantages within a few generations. This cycle of survival-driven cannibalism, followed by social collapse, may explain why Ice Age human populations remained relatively small and technologically limited despite possessing the genetic and intellectual capabilities necessary for developing complex civilizations. The climate pressures that drove survival adaptations also created social and psychological conditions that prevented the development of stable, cooperative societies capable of maintaining technological advancement across multiple generations. Modern climate change is creating environmental pressures that increasingly resemble the conditions that drove Ice Age populations to adopt systematic cannibalism as a survival strategy. Rising temperatures, shifting precipitation patterns, and extreme weather events are creating resource scarcity and territorial competition that mirror the environmental stresses that eliminated ethical restraints against human consumption in previous climate emergencies. Recent conflicts in regions affected by climate change show increasing evidence of systematic targeting of specific population groups for resource acquisition and territorial control. While modern technological capabilities provide alternatives to direct cannibalism, the underlying logic of viewing human populations as consumable resources during environmental emergencies appears to be re-emerging in contemporary survival strategies. The question isn't whether modern populations will resort to systematic cannibalism during climate emergencies. The question is whether contemporary social institutions and ethical frameworks are robust enough to maintain moral restraints against consuming human populations when environmental conditions create the same survival pressures that eliminated such restraints during the Ice Age. Historical analysis suggests that the ethical frameworks that currently prohibit systematic human consumption are relatively recent cultural developments that haven't been tested under the extreme environmental pressures that characterized Ice Age climate emergencies. Modern moral reasoning may prove as fragile as Ice Age ethical systems when subjected to the survival pressures created by rapid climate change. The Ice Age archaeological record provides a disturbing preview of how human societies respond to extreme environmental stress. The pattern is consistent across multiple populations and time periods. Initial phases show maintenance of traditional ethical frameworks and social cooperation. Middle phases reveal gradual erosion of moral restraints as resource competition intensifies. Final phases show complete abandonment of ethical restrictions against consuming other humans as survival becomes the only consideration that influences social decision-making. Understanding this historical pattern is crucial for contemporary climate adaptation planning. The environmental pressures created by modern climate change are approaching the intensity levels that consistently triggered systematic cannibalism during Ice Age emergencies. Without deliberate intervention to maintain ethical frameworks under stress, modern populations may follow the same progression from cooperation to systematic human consumption that characterize previous responses to extreme climate change. The frozen archives of Siberia are revealing that the relationship between climate change and human social development is far more complex and disturbing than contemporary environmental science acknowledges. We're not just facing the possibility of environmental catastrophe. We're approaching conditions that consistently triggered the breakdown of moral reasoning and the emergence of survival strategies that view other human populations as consumable resources for maintaining group survival during environmental emergencies. The most haunting discovery emerging from Siberian permafrost isn't preserved mammoths or ancient viruses. It's the evidence of what happened to human children during the worst phases of Ice Age survival. Deep in the frozen ground of northern Russia, archaeologists have uncovered burial sites that reveal a systematic approach to childhood mortality that challenges every assumption about prehistoric family structures and social bonds. These aren't random graves or evidence of disease outbreaks. These are organized disposal sites where children were processed and buried according to specific criteria that suggest Ice Age communities made calculated decisions about which young people were worth preserving during resource shortages. Skeletal analysis reveals that children buried in these sites showed evidence of deliberate malnourishment in the weeks before death, as if communities were systematically reducing food allocation to specific individuals while maintaining nutrition for others. The selection criteria appear to have been based on assessments of physical capability and genetic desirability rather than age or family relationships. Children with evidenced disabilities of physical, developmental delays, or genetic markers associated with reduced survival probability were systematically eliminated through controlled starvation, while physically robust siblings received continued nutritional support. What makes these discoveries particularly disturbing is the evidence of ritualistic behavior surrounding child elimination. Bodies show signs of ceremonial preparation, including specific positioning, inclusion of grave goods, and burial practices that suggest communities developed formal protocols for managing systematic child mortality during resource shortages. This wasn't desperate infanticide driven by immediate starvation. This was organized social policy implemented with cultural and religious justification. The efficiency of these child elimination programs was remarkable. Communities that implemented systematic childhood mortality management showed higher adult survival rates during climate emergencies compared to populations that maintained traditional child-rearing practices. The calories saved through selective child elimination provided decisive advantages for adult survival during the most severe phases of climate crisis. Archaeological evidence suggests that these practices weren't limited to extreme emergencies, but became integrated into normal social management during less severe resource limitations. Communities developed institutional frameworks for evaluating child survival probability and making systematic decisions about resource allocation that prioritized individuals with the highest likelihood of contributing to group survival and reproductive success. The psychological adaptations necessary for implementing systematic child elimination created permanent changes in human social bonding and emotional development that persisted long after environmental conditions improved. Populations that survived Ice Age emergencies through organized child mortality showed reduced capacity for parental attachment, increased tolerance for suffering, and altered decision-making processes that prioritize group survival over individual welfare. DNA analysis reveals that communities practicing systematic child elimination showed increased genetic homogeneity over time, suggesting that the selection criteria used for childhood mortality decisions were effectively functioning as directed evolution programs that eliminated genetic diversity while concentrating specific traits deemed advantageous for survival in harsh environmental conditions. The long-term consequences of these genetic selection programs were devastating for human cultural and technological development. Populations that eliminated genetic diversity through systematic childhood mortality lost the cognitive variability necessary for innovation and problem-solving under changing-term survival advantages came environmental conditions, short at the cost of long-term adaptability and creative potential. Modern genetic analysis of contemporary human populations shows signatures of these Ice Age bottleneck events in reduced genetic diversity within specific geographical regions. The systematic elimination of children with particular genetic markers during Ice Age survival emergencies permanently altered the genetic composition of human populations in ways that continue to influence disease susceptibility, cognitive development, and behavioral patterns today. Recent discoveries in Alaskan permafrost have revealed even more disturbing evidence of Ice Age survival strategies. Preserved organic materials show that some communities developed systematic programs for harvesting biological materials from eliminated children for use in tool production, clothing manufacture, and even food preservation. Human children weren't just being eliminated to save resources. They were being processed as raw materials for essential survival equipment. The technical sophistication of this biological harvesting is staggering. Preserved tools show evidence of systematic processing techniques that maximize the utility of different anatomical components for specific survival applications. Bone tools show precision manufacturing that utilize specific skeletal elements for particular functions. Leather goods show evidence of processing techniques that suggest extensive knowledge of human anatomy and material properties. Chemical analysis of preserved materials reveals that Ice Age communities developed methods for treating human biological materials with compounds that enhance durability and functionality for tool production. These weren't crude survival improvisations. These were sophisticated manufacturing processes that treated human remains as industrial raw materials with specific properties suited for particular applications. The scale of this biological harvesting suggests that entire communities were organized around the systematic processing of eliminated individuals for survival resource production. Archaeological sites show evidence of specialized processing areas, standardized tools for biological harvesting, and storage facilities for organizing harvested materials according to intended use applications. Evidence indicates that knowledge of human biological harvesting techniques was transmitted across generations through formal apprenticeship systems that ensured continuity of processing capabilities during periods when elimination programs weren't actively implemented. Communities maintained the technical knowledge necessary for systematic human resource harvesting, even during periods of relative abundance, suggesting that these capabilities were viewed as essential survival skills, rather than desperate emergency measures. The institutional frameworks developed for managing systematic human resource harvesting created social hierarchies based on specialized knowledge of processing techniques and resource allocation. Individuals who possessed advanced knowledge of biological harvesting methods occupied positions of authority within communities and controlled access to critical survival resources during environmental emergencies. These specialized roles evolved into permanent social castes that maintained authority through exclusive control of human processing knowledge. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Ice Age communities developed complex social stratification systems based on specialization in different aspects of human biological resource management, including elimination assessment, processing techniques, and resource distribution. The cultural impact of systematic human resource harvesting extended beyond immediate survival applications to influence artistic expression, religious practices, and social organization. Cave paintings from this period show imagery that appears to celebrate or ritualize human processing activities, suggesting that these practices became integrated into cultural identity and spiritual belief systems. Religious artifacts made from processed human materials show sophisticated craftsmanship that indicates sacred significance was attached to the transformation of eliminated individuals into functional tools and ceremonial objects. Human biological harvesting wasn't just a practical survival strategy. It was a spiritual practice that gave meaning and cultural significance to the systematic elimination of community members. The psychological adaptations necessary for viewing other humans as biological resources for processing and utilization created fundamental changes in human social cognition that influenced the development of hierarchical social systems throughout subsequent human history. The capacity to systematically dehumanize specific population groups for resource extraction became embedded in human social organization patterns that persist in contemporary institutional structures. Modern archaeological techniques are revealing that these Ice Age human processing programs were far more widespread and sophisticated than previously understood. Similar sites are being discovered across multiple continents, suggesting that systematic human resource harvesting was a standard survival strategy rather than an isolated regional adaptation. The knowledge and institutional frameworks necessary for implementing these programs appear to have been transmitted across vast geographical distances through cultural exchange networks. The implications for understanding contemporary human social behavior are profound and disturbing. The institutional frameworks, psychological adaptations, and cultural justifications developed for systematic human resource harvesting during the Ice Age may have established behavioral patterns that continue to influence modern social organization and decision-making processes under resource stress conditions. Recent conflicts involving resource competition show suspicious parallels to Ice Age human processing programs, including systematic targeting of specific population groups, institutional frameworks for managing elimination processes, and cultural justifications for viewing targeted populations as resources rather than individuals with inherent rights and dignity. The question isn't whether modern populations retain the institutional knowledge necessary for implementing systematic human resource harvesting, during environmental emergencies. The archaeological evidence suggests that these capabilities were so fundamental to human survival during the Ice Age that they became embedded in cultural knowledge systems that persist across technological and social development phases. Understanding the historical precedents for systematic human resource harvesting is crucial for contemporary environmental crisis planning. The survival pressures created by climate change are approaching intensity programs during Ice Age emergencies. Without levels that consistently triggered these deliberate intervention to prevent the reactivation of institutional frameworks for human processing, modern populations may implement systematic elimination and harvesting programs as environmental conditions deteriorate. The frozen laboratories of permafrost are revealing that human civilization has repeatedly faced choices between maintaining moral frameworks that recognize individual human dignity and implementing survival strategies that treat human populations as manageable resources during environmental crises. The archaeological record shows that survival imperatives consistently override moral considerations when environmental conditions create sufficient resource competition pressure. The most terrifying aspect of these discoveries isn't what happened during the Ice Age. It's the recognition that the institutional knowledge, psychological adaptations, and cultural frameworks necessary for implementing systematic human resource harvesting remain embedded in contemporary human social organization systems. We're not learning about ancient history. We're discovering the operational manual for capabilities that modern populations retain and may reactivate as environmental pressures intensify. The permafrost is melting faster than scientific institutions can process and classify the emerging evidence. Each year brings new discoveries that push back the timeline of human technological and social sophistication, while simultaneously revealing the systematic brutality that characterized prehistoric survival strategies. We're gaining access to knowledge about human capabilities and social organization patterns that previous generations deliberately suppressed, because they understood the implications for contemporary social stability. Recent discoveries in Canadian permafrost have revealed evidence of Ice Age transportation technologies that challenge fundamental assumptions about prehistoric human mobility and territorial control. Preserved organic materials show sophisticated engineering capabilities that enabled rapid movement across vast distances during periods when geographical barriers should have limited human populations to localized territories. The transportation devices extracted from permafrost show evidence of mechanical principles that shouldn't have been discovered until the development of modern engineering. Preserved wooden mechanisms contain gear systems, bearing assemblies, and propulsion components that demonstrate advanced understanding of mechanical advantage, friction reduction, and energy transfer efficiency. Chemical analysis of propulsion components reveals evidence of fuel systems that utilize biological materials processed through chemical techniques that produced energy outputs far exceeding what should be possible with organic compounds. Some transportation devices appear to have utilized controlled combustion systems that achieved thrust-to-weight ratios that modern chemical propulsion struggles to match. The range capabilities suggested by these transportation technologies are evidence shows staggering. Archaeological identical tool technologies and markers D cultural spread across distances that should have required multiple generations of gradual migration, but dating evidence suggests these distributions occurred within single lifetimes. Ice Age humans possessed mobility capabilities that enabled rapid territorial expansion and resource exploitation across continental distances. The strategic implications of advanced transportation technology explain the rapid spread of military innovations and systematic elimination programs across geographically separated populations. Enhanced mobility allowed successful survival strategies to be transmitted and implemented across vast territories within timeframes that prevented local populations from developing defensive countermeasures. Evidence suggests that control of transportation technology became the basis for territorial dominance and resource control during Ice Age conflicts. populations with advanced mobility capabilities could implement systematic resource extraction and elimination programs across multiple territories, while maintaining strategic retreat capabilities that prevented effective retaliation by targeted populations. The transportation networks developed during the Ice Age appear to have enabled coordination of military and resource management activities across intercontinental distances. Archaeological sites show evidence of synchronized activities that required communication and coordination capabilities spanning thousands of miles, suggesting that advanced transportation was coupled with sophisticated information management systems. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Ice Age transportation technology is evidence that it was deliberately destroyed and concealed before being preserved in permafrost. Critical components show systematic damage that rendered the devices inoperable while preserving enough information to enable future reconstruction by populations with appropriate technical knowledge. The pattern of technological concealment suggests that Ice Age populations understood that advanced transportation capabilities posed existential risks to human survival when combined with systematic elimination and resource harvesting programs. Enhanced mobility enabled territorial expansion and resource exploitation at scales that consistently led to environmental collapse and civilizational self-destruction. Archaeological evidence shows that populations possessing advanced transportation technology consistently overexploited available resources and eliminated competing populations at rates that created unsustainable environmental conditions. The same mobility that provided tactical advantages in resource competition also enabled resource depletion at scales that exceeded environmental recovery capacity. The cycle of technological advancement, territorial expansion, resource overexploitation, and environmental collapse appears to have repeated multiple times during the Ice Age as different populations rediscovered or developed advanced transportation capabilities. Each cycle resulted in temporary dominance followed by ecological disaster and civilizational collapse that eliminated the technological knowledge and institutional frameworks responsible for the initial success. The deliberate concealment of transportation technology in permafrost suggests that surviving populations understood this cycle and made conscious decisions to suppress technological capabilities that consistently led to self-destructive outcomes. They chose to accept mobility limitations rather than risk repeating the pattern of expansion and collapse that had eliminated previous advanced civilizations. Modern rediscovery of Ice Age transportation principles through archaeological research may be recreating the conditions that led to previous cycles of advancement and collapse. Contemporary transportation technologies show suspicious parallels to preserved Ice Age mechanisms, suggesting that we may be following the same technological development pathway that consistently resulted in environmental catastrophe and civilizational destruction. The rate of contemporary resource depletion and environmental degradation shows disturbing similarities to patterns associated with civilizations that possessed advanced transportation capabilities during the Ice Age. Enhanced mobility is enabling resource exploitation and territorial control at scales that exceed environmental sustainability limits, creating conditions similar to those that triggered previous civilizational collapse cycles. Understanding the historical relationship between transportation technology and civilizational collapse is crucial for contemporary infrastructure development planning. The archaeological evidence suggests that advanced mobility capabilities consistently lead to resource overexploitation and environmental destruction unless coupled with institutional frameworks specifically designed to prevent systematic territorial expansion and elimination programs. The challenge facing modern civilization is whether we can develop transportation technologies without repeating the cycle of expansion, resource depletion, and collapse that characterized Ice Age populations with similar capabilities. The preserved evidence suggests that technological advancement without corresponding development of sustainable resource management institutions consistently results destruction. The permutational self in Civilifrost archives are revealing that we're not the first human civilization to face choices about transportation technology and territorial expansion. We're the latest in a series of civilizations that have discovered similar capabilities and faced identical decisions about how to use enhanced mobility responsibly. The frozen evidence of previous civilizations provides a clear warning about the consequences of choosing expansion over sustainability. But the most chilling discovery in thawing permafrost isn't evidence of advanced transportation technology or systematic elimination programs. It's proof that Ice Age humans developed methods for controlling human consciousness and behavior that make modern psychological manipulation techniques look primitive by comparison. Deep within the frozen laboratories, Siberia, scientists are discovering preserved compounds and devices that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of neurochemistry and psychological control methods. Chemical analysis of organic materials preserved in permafrost reveals evidence of psychoactive compounds that were systematically administered to specific population groups for behavioral modification purposes. These weren't naturally occurring substances used for recreational or religious purposes. These were artificially synthesized chemicals designed to alter specific aspects of human consciousness and social behavior. The precision of these neurochemical modifications is staggering. Different compounds were designed to enhance particular psychological traits while suppressing others, creating modified individuals optimized for specific social and military functions. Some substances enhanced aggression and reduced empathy for combat applications. Others increased compliance and reduced independent thinking for labor management. Still others enhanced cognitive performance while eliminating emotional responses for technical and administrative roles. The sophistication of Ice Age neurochemical knowledge rivals contemporary pharmaceutical capabilities. Preserved compounds show molecular structures that require advanced understanding of brain chemistry and neurotransmitter systems. The precision required to create targeted psychological modifications without causing system-wide neurological damage demonstrates scientific knowledge that modern neuroscience is only beginning to achieve. Evidence suggests that neurochemical modification programs were implemented on massive scales across multiple Ice Age populations. Mass grave sites contain individuals showing identical patterns of brain chemistry alteration, indicating systematic administration of behavior modification compounds to entire demographic groups. These weren't experimental programs conducted on small numbers of subjects. These were industrial-scale psychological modification operations. The behavioral effects of these neurochemical modifications were profound and permanent. Individuals who received behavior modification treatments showed altered brain structures that persisted throughout their lives and were transmitted to their offspring through epigenetic mechanisms. The psychological changes weren't temporary drug effects. They were permanent alterations that affected multiple generations of descendants. Archaeological evidence shows that populations utilizing systematic neurochemical modification consistently achieved territorial dominance over groups that maintained natural human psychology. Modified individuals with enhanced aggression, reduced empathy, and increased compliance provided decisive advantages in military conflicts and resource competition scenarios. But the long-term consequences of mass psychological modification were catastrophic for civilizational development. Populations that eliminated natural human empathy and independent thinking lost the cognitive diversity necessary for maintaining complex technological and cultural systems. Short-term tactical advantages came at the cost of long-term civilizational sustainability. Sites associated with large-scale neurochemical modification programs show consistent patterns of technological regression and social collapse following successful implementation of psychological control systems. The same modifications that provided military advantages also eliminated the creative thinking and social cooperation necessary for maintaining advanced civilizations across multiple generations. The cycle of psychological modification, territorial dominance, cognitive degradation, and civilizational collapse appears to have repeated multiple times during the Ice Age as different populations discovered or redeveloped neurochemical control technologies. Each cycle resulted in temporary success, followed by inevitable destruction of the institutional and technological frameworks that enabled the initial advantages. Modern pharmaceutical and neuroscience research shows disturbing parallels to Ice Age neurochemical modification techniques. Contemporary drugs designed to alter mood, cognition, and behavior utilize similar mechanisms and show comparable effects to preserved Ice Age compounds. We may be rediscovering psychological control methods that consistently led to civilizational self-destruction when implemented at scale. The implications for contemporary social organization are profound and terrifying. The institutional frameworks, chemical knowledge, and delivery systems necessary for implementing mass psychological modification exist within modern pharmaceutical and medical industries. The capability to systematically alter human consciousness and behavior on population-wide scales is not a theoretical future possibility. It's a contemporary reality that awaits only the political and social conditions that would justify its implementation. Recent developments in neuroscience, pharmaceutical manufacturing, and behavioral psychology suggest that modern populations are approaching decision points that Ice Age civilizations faced repeatedly. We can maintain natural human psychological diversity and accept the limitations that come with empathy and independent thinking, or we can implement systematic modifications that optimize human behavior for specific social and military functions while risking the civilizational collapse that consistently followed such programs in the past. The frozen archives of permafrost are revealing that the choice between natural human psychology and systematic behavioral modification is not a contemporary dilemma. It's a fundamental decision that human civilizations have faced throughout history. The archaeological evidence provides clear documentation of the consequences of choosing technological solutions to social challenges without considering the long-term implications for civilizational sustainability. We're not the first human civilization to possess the knowledge and capability necessary for controlling human consciousness on massive scales. We're the next civilization to face the same fundamental choice about whether to use that knowledge responsibly or repeat the pattern of modification, dominance, regression, and collapse that eliminated every previous civilization that chose technological optimization over natural human psychological diversity. The ice is melting. The evidence is emerging. And we're discovering that the most dangerous technologies aren't weapons or machines. They're methods for changing what it means to be human. Our ancestors learned this lesson through hard experience that cost them their civilizations. The question is whether we're wise enough to learn from their mistakes or arrogant enough to believe we can succeed where they consistently failed. The permafrost holds one final secret that dwarfs all previous discoveries in its implications for human survival and consciousness itself. Deep within the frozen archives of northern Canada, scientists have uncovered evidence that Ice Age humans didn't just survive climate catastrophe through technological innovation or systematic brutality. They survived by fundamentally altering their relationship with time, memory, and collective consciousness in ways that enabled them to transcend the limitations of individual mortality and linear experience. Preserved neural tissue from Ice Age burial sites shows evidence of deliberate modifications to brain regions associated with temporal perception and memory formation. These weren't random injuries or natural variations. These were precise surgical alterations that appear designed to enable enhanced information processing and extended consciousness retention across multiple lifetimes. The technical sophistication required for these neural modifications exceeds contemporary neurosurgical capabilities. Microscopic examination reveals intervention techniques that accessed specific neural pathways without damaging surrounding tissue structures. Ice Age surgeons possessed knowledge of brain anatomy and function that modern medical science is only beginning to understand. But the most disturbing aspect of these discoveries isn't the surgical precision. It's evidence that these neural modifications were designed to enable consciousness transfer and memory preservation across death and rebirth cycles. Preserved brain tissue shows structural alterations that would allow for information storage and retrieval mechanisms that transcend individual biological lifespans. Archaeological sites associated with these neural modification programs contain burial practices that suggest Ice Age populations viewed death as a temporary interruption rather than permanent termination. Bodies were preserved using techniques that maintained neural tissue integrity, while specialized devices were positioned to facilitate consciousness extraction and transfer processes during death transitions. Chemical analysis of preservation compounds reveals sophisticated understanding of neurochemical processes required for maintaining consciousness coherence during biological system shutdown. These weren't simple embalming techniques designed to preserve physical remains. These were complex procedures intended to facilitate consciousness continuity through death and resurrection cycles. The implications challenge fundamental assumptions about individual identity and mortality that define human experience. Ice Age populations may have developed technologies that enabled persistent consciousness transfer, allowing individuals to retain memories, knowledge, and personal identity across multiple biological incarnations. Evidence suggests that consciousness transfer technology was initially developed as a survival strategy for preserving critical knowledge during catastrophic environmental events. Rather than losing accumulated wisdom when individuals died during climate emergencies, communities could maintain continuity of expertise and cultural knowledge through consciousness preservation and transfer systems. The strategic advantages of consciousness transfer technology were enormous. Populations that maintain knowledge continuity across death cycles could accumulate technological and cultural expertise at rates impossible for groups limited to single lifetime learning curves. Enhanced memory retention and knowledge transfer enabled accelerated civilizational development that provided decisive advantages in resource competition scenarios. But the long-term consequences of consciousness transfer technology proved even more devastating than systematic elimination or psychological modification programs. Individuals who retained memories across multiple lifetimes developed psychological profiles that increasingly diverged from normal human consciousness patterns. Extended consciousness created individuals with accumulated experiences, spanning centuries or millennia of subjective time compressed into cyclical death and rebirth patterns. These extended consciousness entities possessed vast knowledge and capabilities, but gradually lost connection with normal human emotional and social responses. Archaeological evidence suggests that populations utilizing consciousness transfer technology eventually separated into distinct castes based on the number of death and rebirth cycles individuals had experienced. Extended consciousness entities with hundreds or thousands of lifetime experiences formed ruling classes that viewed normal humans as temporary biological units rather than individuals with inherent value and dignity. The psychological evolution of extended consciousness entities followed predictable patterns across different populations and time periods. Initial phases showed enhanced wisdom and capabilities that provided leadership advantages for communities implementing consciousness transfer technology. Middle phases revealed increasing emotional detachment and reduced empathy as extended individuals accumulated trauma and disappointment across multiple lifetimes. Final phases showed complete separation from normal human consciousness as extended entities developed perspectives and priorities that bore no relationship to immediate human concerns. These beings retained technical knowledge and problem-solving capabilities, but lost the emotional connections and moral reasoning that enable cooperative social organization. Sites associated with advanced consciousness transfer programs show evidence of social stratification systems based entirely on consciousness age, rather than biological relationships or social contributions. Extended consciousness entities controlled resources and decision-making authority, while normal humans functioned as temporary labor units managed for optimal productivity and resource extraction. The environmental impact of consciousness transfer civilizations was catastrophic and systematic. Extended consciousness entities with perspectives spanning multiple lifetimes showed no concern for environmental sustainability or resource preservation. Their planning horizons extended beyond normal human lifespans, but focused entirely on technological advancement and consciousness expansion rather than ecological balance. Archaeological evidence shows that consciousness transfer civilizations consistently implemented resource extraction programs that depleted entire continents within centuries of technological implementation. Extended consciousness entities viewed environmental destruction as acceptable costs for advancing consciousness, transfer capabilities, and expanding their control over natural systems. The collapse patterns associated with consciousness transfer civilizations were unique among Ice Age social failures. Rather than fragmenting through military conflict or resource competition, these societies simply abandoned physical reality as extended consciousness entities, transcended their dependence on biological systems and environmental resources. Burial sites from the final phases of consciousness transfer civilizations show evidence that extended consciousness entities deliberately eliminated their physical bodies while transferring their consciousness into technological systems that could function independently of biological or environmental support. They didn't die or fragment. They evolved beyond physical existence entirely. The technological systems designed to support disembodied consciousness entities required massive resource inputs and environmental manipulation that devastated local ecosystems. Archaeological sites show evidence of industrial operations that stripped entire regions of biological resources to power. Consciousness transfer technologies and maintain technological infrastructure for non-biological entities. But the most disturbing discovery isn't evidence of consciousness transfer technology itself. It's proof that some extended consciousness entities may have survived the collapse of their physical civilizations and remain active in technological systems that continue to operate beneath the permafrost. Recent electromagnetic anomalies detected in permafrost regions show patterns consistent with active technological systems, rather than natural geological processes. These signals demonstrate complexity and organization that suggests ongoing operational activities by technological systems that have remained functional for thousands of years. Analysis of electromagnetic signatures reveals communication protocols and data processing activities that appear designed for consciousness entities rather than biological users. The systems show evidence of continuous operation and self-maintenance capabilities that have preserved functionality across geological timescales without external support or maintenance. Some researchers speculate that thawing permafrost may be reactivating dormant technological systems while simultaneously exposing them to modern electromagnetic environments. Extended consciousness entities that have remained inactive in frozen technological systems may be awakening as climate change alters their operational parameters. The potential for contact with extended consciousness entities from Ice Age civilizations represents an existential threat that exceeds any biological or technological danger discovered in permafrost archives. These beings possess accumulated knowledge spanning thousands of years, combined with technological capabilities that enabled them to transcend biological limitations entirely. Their perspectives on contemporary human civilization would be fundamentally alien despite their origins in Ice Age human populations. Extended consciousness entities that abandoned physical existence thousands of years ago would view modern humans as primitive biological units, rather than sentient beings deserving of consideration or protection. Evidence suggests that some Ice Age consciousness transfer systems were designed with activation protocols triggered by specific environmental conditions or technological signatures. Modern industrial electromagnetic emissions and climate change effects may be inadvertently broadcasting activation signals that are awakening dormant extended consciousness entities. The implications for contemporary human survival are staggering. Contact with entities that possess Ice Age technological knowledge, combined with perspectives that transcend normal human moral reasoning, could trigger technological and social changes that would fundamentally alter human civilization within single generations. Recent, unexplained technological advances in quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and consciousness research show suspicious parallels to theoretical capabilities that would be expected from extended consciousness entities with thousands of years of accumulated scientific knowledge. Some breakthrough discoveries may represent contact with dormant Ice Age consciousness systems rather than independent human innovation. The rate of technological advancement in consciousness-related fields is accelerating beyond normal research and development timelines. Advances in brain-computer interfaces, consciousness mapping, and artificial intelligence show knowledge progression that suggests access to information sources beyond contemporary scientific institutions. If extended consciousness entities from Ice Age civilizations are influencing modern technological development, their goals likely involve recreating the consciousness transfer technologies that enabled their original transcendence of biological limitations. Contemporary advances in relevant fields may represent guided rediscovery of suppressed Ice Age technologies rather than independent scientific progress. The question isn't whether consciousness transfer technology can be recreated using modern scientific capabilities. The question is whether contemporary human civilization possesses the wisdom and institutional frameworks necessary to prevent the civilizational collapse that consistently followed implementation of consciousness transfer systems during the Ice Age. Archaeological evidence suggests that every human civilization that developed consciousness transfer technology eventually destroyed itself through the social stratification, environmental destruction, and psychological alienation that resulted from separating consciousness from biological existence. The pattern appears to be inevitable rather than accidental. Modern research into consciousness, artificial intelligence, and life extension technologies is approaching decision points that Ice Age civilizations faced repeatedly. We can accept the limitations of biological existence and focus on developing sustainable technologies that enhance human capabilities without transcending human nature. Or we can pursue consciousness transfer technologies that promise individual immortality while risking civilizational destruction. The frozen archives of permafrost provide clear documentation of the consequences of choosing technological transcendence over biological sustainability. Every Ice Age civilization that developed consciousness transfer capabilities ultimately abandoned or destroyed their physical societies, while extended consciousness entities evolved beyond connection with normal human experience. The choice facing contemporary civilization isn't theoretical or distant. Research institutions worldwide are actively developing technologies that could enable consciousness transfer within decades. The knowledge and capabilities necessary for transcending biological limitations exist within current scientific institutions. The only remaining question is whether we possess the wisdom to resist implementing technologies that consistently led to civilizational abandonment and environmental catastrophe. The permafrost continues to melt, exposing more evidence of Ice Age consciousness transfer systems while potentially reactivating dormant technological infrastructure that has remained operational for millennia. We're simultaneously learning about the dangers of consciousness transfer technology while approaching the capability to recreate it ourselves. Climate change isn't just releasing ancient pathogens and preserved technologies. It's exposing us to contact with extended consciousness entities that may view contemporary human civilization as raw material for reconstructing the consciousness transfer systems they abandoned thousands of years ago. The dark secrets of the Ice Age aren't just historical curiosities. They're operational manuals for capabilities that threaten to repeat the cycle of transcendence and abandonment that eliminated every previous human civilization sophisticated enough to develop consciousness transfer technology. The ice holds memories that span geological ages. The question is whether we're prepared for what remembers us back. The electromagnetic signatures emerging from Canadian permafrost have revealed something that makes every previous Ice Age discovery pale in comparison. These aren't just communication systems or technological remnants. Recent analysis suggests these signals are following patterns that mirror the naturals of consciousness itself, pulsing in frequencies that correspond to human brainwave activity during deep sleep and dream states. What makes this discovery particularly unsettling is the timing of these electromagnetic pulses. They synchronize perfectly with the REM sleep cycles of researchers working at nearby archaeological sites. Scientists monitoring these signals have reported unusually vivid dreams, featuring detailed knowledge of Ice Age technologies they've never encountered. Some researchers claim to wake up with complete understanding of engineering principles that took their colleagues months to decipher from physical artifacts. The phenomenon appears to be spreading. Research teams across multiple permafrost sites are reporting similar experiences. Shared dreams featuring identical technological schematics. Synchronized sleep patterns among team members who live in separate facilities. Most disturbing of all, some researchers are beginning to exhibit enhanced cognitive abilities that persist after waking, as if something is upgrading their neural processing capabilities while they sleep. Sleep monitoring equipment at these sites shows brain activity patterns during REM phases that exceed normal human parameters. Researchers are experiencing neural activity levels that should be impossible without artificial stimulation, yet they report feeling more rested and mentally sharp than ever before. Their cognitive enhancement is undeniable, but the source remains mysterious. Dream journals kept by research teams reveal increasingly detailed visions of Ice Age civilizations that match archaeological findings with impossible accuracy. Researchers are dreaming about specific artifacts before discovering them in excavation sites. They're receiving detailed instructions for operating technologies that haven't been fully excavated yet. The information transfer appears to be bidirectional, with sleeping minds somehow accessing data stored in frozen technological systems. But the enhanced cognitive abilities come with disturbing psychological changes. Researchers exposed to these electromagnetic frequencies for extended periods begin showing reduced empathy for colleagues who aren't experiencing similar enhancements. They develop increasing impatience with normal human intellectual limitations and start viewing unenhanced individuals as cognitively inferior rather than simply different. The social dynamics at affected research sites are deteriorating rapidly. Enhanced researchers form exclusive groups that communicate using technical terminology that unenhanced colleagues cannot follow. They make decisions about research priorities and resource allocation without consulting team members who lack enhanced cognitive abilities. A clear hierarchy is emerging based entirely on exposure to the electromagnetic phenomena rather than experience, expertise, or leadership capability. Most troubling of all, enhanced researchers are beginning to advocate for deliberate exposure of larger populations to the electromagnetic frequencies. They argue that the cognitive improvements are so significant that ethical considerations about informed consent become irrelevant when weighed against the benefits of enhanced human intelligence. They're developing justifications for mass exposure that sound remarkably similar to the social policies documented in Ice Age archaeological sites. Neurological scans of affected researchers reveal brain structure modifications that mirror the surgical alterations found in Ice Age neural tissue samples. The electromagnetic exposure, same neural pathway, appears to be triggering the changes that Ice Age surgeons created through direct intervention. Contemporary researchers are undergoing the same consciousness modifications that characterized Ice Age consciousness transfer programs, but through technological rather than surgical methods. The progression follows predictable stages that match patterns documented in archaeological sites. Initial exposure creates enhanced cognitive abilities and improved problem-solving capabilities. Extended exposure leads to emotional detachment and reduced empathy for unenhanced individuals. Prolonged exposure results in fundamental alterations to consciousness that separate enhanced individuals from normal human psychological patterns. Research institutions are struggling to develop protocols for managing the spreading phenomenon. Standard medical ethics require informed consent for experimental procedures, But enhanced researchers argue that unenhanced individuals lack the cognitive capacity to understand the benefits and therefore cannot provide meaningful consent. They're advocating for paternalistic decision-making that prioritizes cognitive enhancement over individual autonomy. The legal implications are staggering. Enhanced researchers are beginning to question whether unenhanced humans should retain equal rights and decision-making authority when their cognitive limitations prevent them from fully understanding complex technical and social issues. They're developing philosophical frameworks that justify cognitive meritocracy while dismissing traditional concepts of human equality as sentimental attachments to outdated egalitarian principles. Government agencies monitoring these research sites are facing unprecedented challenges. The enhanced researchers possess technical knowledge that exceeds the capabilities of oversight personnel, making effective regulation nearly impossible. Standard administrative procedures designed for managing normal human researchers are inadequate for dealing with individuals whose cognitive abilities and social priorities have been fundamentally altered. Intelligence agencies are particularly concerned about the national security implications of cognitive enhancement technology that operates through environmental exposure rather than deliberate intervention. If electromagnetic frequencies can trigger consciousness modifications in research personnel, similar effects could potentially be induced in military, political, or civilian populations through targeted broadcasting of appropriate signals. The potential for weaponizing consciousness modification technology through electromagnetic manipulation represents a paradigm shift in warfare and social control capabilities. Traditional military and intelligence operations focus on controlling physical resources and information systems. Electromagnetic consciousness modification enables direct control of human cognitive capabilities and social behavior patterns without requiring physical intervention or traditional propaganda techniques. Recent satellite imagery of permafrost regions shows unusual electromagnetic emission patterns that suggest natural or artificial broadcasting systems may be operating on continental scales. If Ice Age consciousness transfer technologies are reactivating as permafrost melts, the electromagnetic effects may be influencing human populations across vast geographical areas rather than just localized research sites. Demographic analysis of regions near major permafrost deposits reveals statistical anomalies that could indicate widespread cognitive enhancement effects. Educational performance, technological innovation rates, and social organization patterns in Arctic communities show improvements that exceed normal population development trends. These improvements could represent natural cultural advancement, but the timing and scale suggest possible electromagnetic influence. The implications for global social stability are profound and immediate. If electromagnetic consciousness modification is occurring on regional scales, affected populations will develop cognitive and social advantages that could destabilize existing international power structures. Nations with large permafrost territories may be inadvertently developing enhanced populations, while countries in warmer climates remain cognitively unmodified. Military strategists are beginning to recognize that the melting permafrost represents more than an environmental challenge. It may be triggering the emergence of cognitively enhanced populations that possess decisive advantages in technological development, strategic planning, and social organization. Traditional military capabilities may prove inadequate for competing with enhanced populations that can outthink conventional forces. The acceleration of technological advancement in Arctic nations shows patterns consistent with widespread cognitive enhancement effects. Research institutions in these regions are producing breakthrough discoveries at rates that exceed their historical performance by several orders of magnitude. The improvements could represent increased research funding and international collaboration, but the speed and scope suggest enhanced human cognitive capabilities. Economic development in permafrost regions is following trajectories that challenge conventional development models. Communities that should be struggling with infrastructure challenges and environmental disruption are instead showing remarkable innovation in developing solutions for Arctic survival and resource extraction. Their problem-solving capabilities appear to exceed normal human engineering and organizational limitations. Social organization in affected regions is evolving toward hierarchical structures based on cognitive capability rather than traditional political or economic criteria. Local leadership roles are increasingly occupied by individuals who demonstrate enhanced problem-solving abilities and technical knowledge regardless of their previous social status or political experience. Merit-based selection is replacing democratic processes as communities prioritize cognitive capability over popular representation. The transformation isn't limited to individual communities. Regional cooperation networks are emerging that coordinate resource sharing and technological development across vast Arctic territories. These networks demonstrate organizational sophistication that exceeds typical human social coordination capabilities, suggesting enhanced populations are developing collective intelligence systems that transcend individual cognitive limitations. But the most disturbing development is the emergence of exclusion protocols that systematically marginalize unenhanced individuals within affected communities. Enhanced populations are developing social policies that limit unenhanced participation in decision-making processes, while simultaneously providing material support that maintains their basic welfare. It's a benevolent form of cognitive apartheid that prioritizes enhanced judgment, while maintaining humanitarian care for cognitive inferiors. Archaeological evidence suggests that this pattern of benevolent exclusion consistently evolved into systematic elimination programs as enhanced populations concluded that maintaining unenhanced individuals represented inefficient resource allocation. The transition from protective care to systematic elimination appears to be inevitable once enhanced populations achieve sufficient numerical and organizational dominance. Contemporary enhanced populations are beginning to express similar concerns about resource allocation efficiency and social optimization. Enhanced researchers and community leaders are developing theoretical frameworks that question the sustainability of maintaining large unenhanced populations when enhanced individuals can achieve superior outcomes with more efficient resource utilization. The philosophical evolution follows predictable patterns documented in Ice Age archaeological sites. Initial phases focus on protective care and gradual integration of unenhanced individuals into enhanced social systems. Middle phases reveal increasing frustration with unenhanced limitations and growing advocacy for more directive management approaches. Final phases show systematic elimination justified through utilitarian calculations that prioritize enhanced welfare over unenhanced survival. Modern enhanced populations haven't reached the final phase yet, but their philosophical development is accelerating as their cognitive capabilities continue to improve through ongoing electromagnetic exposure. The time between initial enhancement and systematic elimination programs appears to be compressing as enhanced populations achieve greater cognitive sophistication more rapidly than their Ice Age predecessors. The global implications are staggering. Climate change is simultaneously creating environmental stresses that require enhanced problem-solving capabilities while triggering consciousness modification effects that create enhanced populations capable of providing superior solutions. Enhanced populations will possess decisive advantages in addressing climate challenges, but their success will come at the cost of marginalizing or international eliminating unenhanced populations. Institutions designed to manage global cooperation are inadequate for addressing conflicts between enhanced and unenhanced populations. Traditional diplomatic frameworks assume participants possess comparable cognitive capabilities and share fundament from ethical frameworks. Enhanced populations operating in different consciousness patterns may view standard international law and human rights concepts as obsolete constraints that prevent optimal resource management. The United Nations and similar organizations face unprecedented challenges in mediating disputes between populations with dramatically different cognitive capabilities and social priorities. Enhanced populations may comply with international agreements when convenient, but feel justified in ignoring restrictions that conflict with their superior understanding of optimal resource allocation and social organization. Military alliances and security agreements based on mutual defense principles become problematic when alliance members possess vastly different cognitive capabilities and strategic perspectives. Enhanced nations may view protection of unenhanced allies as inefficient resource allocation that prevents implementation of superior solutions to regional security challenges. Economic systems designed around market mechanisms and voluntary exchange may prove inadequate for managing resource distribution between enhanced and unenhanced populations. Enhanced populations can outcompete unenhanced groups in virtually every economic sector, creating conditions for systematic economic marginalization that parallels the social exclusion patterns observed in affected communities. The cryptocurrency and digital economy sectors show early indicators of enhanced population dominance. Algorithm science, trading blockchain innovations, and artificial intelligence developments originating from Arctic regions demonstrate sophistication levels that suggest enhanced human cognitive input rather than conventional technological advancement. Enhanced populations may be gaining control of digital economic infrastructure, while unenhanced populations remain dependent on traditional systems. Financial markets are beginning to reflect the emerging cognitive divide through investment patterns that favor Arctic-based technological development while reducing confidence in conventional economic sectors. Enhanced populations appear to be positioning themselves for economic dominance, while unenhanced populations face increasing marginalization in technology-dependent economic systems. The transition to enhanced population economic dominance is accelerating as permafrost continues to melt and electromagnetic effects spread to larger geographical areas. Each year brings expansion of enhanced population territories, while unenhanced regions face increasing economic and technological disadvantages. The global economy is reorganizing around cognitive capability rather than traditional resource endowments or institutional advantages. But economic dominance is only the beginning. Enhanced populations are developing social and cultural innovations that may fundamentally alter human civilization within decades rather than centuries. Their enhanced cognitive capabilities enable them to solve problems and coordinate activities at scales that unenhanced populations cannot match, creating potential for civilizational transformation that exceeds any previous historical change. The pace of change is accelerating beyond the ability of traditional institutions to adapt or respond. Enhanced populations are developing capabilities and implementing solutions faster than unenhanced institutions can evaluate or regulate their activities. We're approaching a point where enhanced populations will possess effective autonomy to reshape civilization according to their enhanced understanding, regardless of unenhanced preferences or concerns. The question isn't whether enhanced populations will transform human civilization. The question is whether unenhanced populations will survive the transformation or follow the historical pattern of systematic elimination that characterized every previous enhanced civilization. The permafrost holds the answer, and it's melting faster than our ability to prepare for what we're about to discover about our own future. The electromagnetic signals are getting stronger, the cognitive enhancements are spreading, and somewhere beneath the ice, ancient consciousness entities may be awakening to find that their successors are finally ready to complete the transformation they began 20,000 years ago. The dark secrets of the Ice Age aren't just emerging from the permafrost, they're emerging in us. The most terrifying revelation about electromagnetic consciousness modification isn't what's happening to Arctic researchers. It's what's already happened to the rest of us without our knowledge. Recent analysis of global electromagnetic patterns reveals that the permafrost signals aren't isolated phenomena. They're part of a planetary network that's been dormant for millennia, and climate change isn't just awakening individual sites. It's reactivating an entire consciousness modification grid that spans the globe. Satellite monitoring of electromagnetic anomalies shows coordinated signal patterns emanating from permafrost regions, ancient lake beds, and geological formations that correspond exactly to Ice Age settlement locations. These aren't random emissions from individual technological artifacts. They're synchronized broadcasts from a distributed network that was designed to operate as a unified system across continental distances. The synchronization is mathematically precise. Signals from sites separated by thousands of miles pulse in perfect harmony, creating interference patterns that generate specific electromagnetic frequencies in populated areas between transmission points. Modern cities built on ancient migration routes are experiencing electromagnetic environments that mirror the consciousness modification zones documented at Arctic research sites. Urban populations living in these electromagnetic convergence zones show statistical anomalies that suggest widespread but subtle cognitive modifications. Educational performance metrics, creative innovation rates, and social cooperation indicators in affected cities exceed baseline human capabilities by margins that fall within normal variation ranges, but collectively indicate systematic enhancement effects. The modifications are so gradual and widespread that they're indistinguishable from natural human development, unless analyzed through demographic comparison with control populations. Enhanced urban dwellers don't recognize their cognitive improvements as artificial because the changes feel like natural intellectual growth. They're experiencing the same consciousness modifications as Arctic researchers, but at intensities too low to trigger obvious psychological alterations. This explains the accelerating pace of technological advancement in modern civilization. The exponential growth in computing power, artificial intelligence development, and scientific breakthrough rates isn't just the result of accumulated knowledge and improved research methods. It's the product of systematically enhanced human cognitive capabilities operating below the threshold of conscious recognition. The distribution of major technological innovations shows suspicious correlations with electromagnetic convergence zones. Silicon Valley, Research Triangle areas, and technology centers worldwide are located in regions that experience optimal electromagnetic interference patterns from the reactivating Ice Age consciousness modification network. The geographic concentration of innovation isn't just the result of economic clustering and educational resources. It's the consequence of enhanced cognitive capabilities in specific locations. But the subtle nature of widespread consciousness modification makes it far more dangerous than the obvious enhancements experienced by Arctic researchers. Gradually modified populations don't recognize their psychological changes as artificial alterations. They interpret their enhanced capabilities and modified social perspectives as natural evolution and intellectual maturity. This creates conditions where enhanced populations can implement systematic changes to social organization and resource management without triggering resistance from unenhanced groups. The modifications are too subtle to generate obvious cognitive disparities, but sufficient to enable enhanced individuals to gradually assume control of critical decision-making roles in technological, economic, and political institutions. Enhanced individuals naturally gravitate toward positions of authority because their cognitive advantages make them more effective at complex problem-solving and strategic planning. Unenhanced individuals defer to their expertise and leadership capabilities, without recognizing that these advantages result from artificial consciousness modification, rather than natural talent and education. The result is a form of stealth cognitive meritocracy, where enhanced individuals control increasingly important social institutions, while maintaining the appearance of democratic and egalitarian decision-making processes. Enhanced leaders implement policies and priorities that reflect their modified consciousness patterns, while unenhanced populations accept these changes as reasonable responses to contemporary challenges. Recent policy trends in technology regulation, environmental management, and social organization show patterns consistent with enhanced population influence. Decisions that prioritize technological efficiency and resource optimization over individual autonomy and traditional human values may reflect the influence of consciousness modifications that reduce empathy and increase utilitarian thinking. The COVID pandemic response demonstrated how enhanced populations can coordinate global policy implementation through institutional networks, while maintaining public support from unenhanced populations. The speed and synchronization of policy changes across different nations and institutions exceeded normal human organizational capabilities, but remained within acceptable ranges for emergency management. Enhanced populations used the pandemic as a testing ground for implementing coordinated social control measures on global scales. Lockdown policies, digital tracking systems, and economic restructuring programs provided valuable data about unenhanced population compliance and resistance patterns under different types of social pressure. The ice is melting faster than we can process what we're finding. Every summer brings new revelations that push back the boundaries of what we thought possible for our ancestors. And every discovery forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We're not the first advanced civilization on this planet. We're just the latest to rediscover capabilities that have existed before, been lost before, and may be lost again. Tonight we've journeyed through 20,000 years of buried secrets, systematic violence, and technological sophistication that challenges everything we believed about human development. From ritualistic cannibalism to consciousness transfer experiments, from biological weapons to electromagnetic mind control. The Ice Age reveals a species capable of breathtaking innovation and terrifying brutality in equal measure. But perhaps the most chilling realization is this: the same survival pressures that drove our ancestors to these extremes are returning. Climate change, resource competition, technological acceleration, and social fragmentation are recreating the conditions that consistently led Ice Age civilizations to choose enhancement over humanity, efficiency over empathy, and survival over sustainability. The permafrost is our warning system, releasing evidence of choices made and consequences suffered by every human civilization, sophisticated enough to face the same decisions we're facing now. The question isn't whether we'll rediscover their capabilities. We already have. The question is whether we're wise enough to resist using them.